Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the July 13th meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. First on the agenda to approve our minutes for the June 15th meeting. I have a motion to approve. First, Sherry, second. Carl, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, next is to review and approve the agenda for this evening. Is there a motion? Penny, second. Julie, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. All right, so first up is comments from the public. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. For anyone wishing to address the board, please indicate by raising your hand virtually, or you can send a note in the chat.
I think you have to raise your hand virtually. I think the chat is off. Yep. And I'll just keep an eye on this for a moment.
Okay. To address the board. So we'll move on to reports and recognition. And first is to recognize our CABE Student Leadership Award winner.
Sure. Let me see if Katie is here. There she is. Katie, I'm promoting you to a panelist. Katie, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm in the car. My mom asked me to pick up dinner last minute because she couldn't, so, but I'm all set.
Are you driving in the car?
Yeah, I'm driving, but I'm by myself and I'm alone, so it's okay. I told her I could take a Zoom call, but it's okay. This still works.
All right. Stay hands-free. Don't look at us.
No, don't worry.
Look at the road.
I'm parked. Don't worry.
You're parked. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, I think you just demonstrated what I'm about to say, which is, first and foremost, Katie is an admirable multitasker.
Thank you.
She's achieved a balance with her most rigorous academic workload, athletics, and community involvement, and her home responsibilities. A two-season athlete who has deep involvement with mentoring young athletes, she's not one to seek the limelight on her soccer or basketball varsity teams, and she always displays impeccable sportsmanship, keeping her spirits high, and she truly is the glue that often holds her teams together. As a youth soccer referee and a basketball coach, Katie's been a role model to many young girls, working with children of all abilities to ensure a positive experience. With several leadership positions, as well as many hours of service in a philanthropy group, she highly values the time she spends at a local domestic violence care center, where she cares for the children of women who attend support meetings. Her school counselor shared with me, "I've watched with admiration as Katie has navigated the halls of NCHS with purpose, diligence, and empathetic regard for others. While she easily could, she's never allowed any challenges to be an excuse or a reason to limit herself or her dreams. As a result, Katie's an independent learner, digging deep within herself to problem solve and think critically, and to access teacher support, for clarification. She's a loyal friend who is kind to all, the first to be chosen as a lab partner in classes, and the first and last on the court or on the field. Katie will undoubtedly make immediate contributions in her next learning environment in and out of the classroom, as she has for years at NCHS. So Katie, congratulations on being the 2020 CABE Student Leadership Award winner, selected by Board of Ed and staff at New Canaan High School.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate whoever wrote those words, and I was super honored to receive the award. So thank you so much.
Should we ask what you're having for dinner?
I was picking up Cozy in Stanford.
Nice.
So a couple sandwiches, some salads, and yeah.
Very nice. Well, congratulations. Thanks for being with us. We understood why you couldn't be with us last time, given it was the day of the graduation parade.
Yeah. No, yeah, thank you so much for understanding. It was a very hectic day, but I'm happy I can make it this time.
Good. Hope you enjoyed the parade.
Thank you. Yeah, I did for sure.
Good.
So, Katie, congratulations on behalf of the Board of Education. We're just really proud of all of your accomplishments, and we wish you well and all the best in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to de-promote you now.
All right, thank you.
Before you start driving again.
Okay.
Take care, Katie. Congrats.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
very nice.
So now we'll hear from Ms. D'Amico on world languages and an update on our English learner program.
Thank you.
So, Lizette, I'll cue this up for you. Lizette has created a presentation that we're going to be sharing with you. You want to speak to that for a moment, like what you made and how you made it?
So so thank you for letting me come in and talk to you a little bit about our program. I actually created a Screencastify. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see that, but the teachers used a lot of that during the e-learning. I thought it would be an opportunity to showcase what that is, and also allows me not to talk incessantly from home. So hopefully it's a little bit better than listening to me, although it is me.
Nice. So this is something that we've used with our classes as well, right? Your teachers use this with some of the remote learning and as a way to, what we would call it, asynchronous learning.
Yes.
Because it's a recording that people could pull up at different
Whenever
times.
they can. Yep.
And students could go back to it and look at it multiple times, correct? Okay. Let's see if I can do this. Does that look okay for everybody? Okay.
I can't hear it. Can you guys hear it? No.
Can you not hear it?
No sound.
No.
Okay, so I can hear it. And you sound great, Lizette.
Thank you.
So let me do something here. I think if I go to system sound. Let's give this a try. Try this. My apologies.
New Canaan Public Schools.
Can you
To be honest, I began planning for this presentation as soon as I ended my... Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to update you on what has been happening in our world language and ELL programs this school year. My name is Lizette D'Amico, and I'm the K-12 World Language and ELL Administrator for the New Canaan Public Schools. To be honest, I began planning for this presentation as soon as I ended my presentation last year. I was excited about the questions and comments you had, and we all hit the ground running in the fall. As you know, in New Canaan, we have a very exciting and unique elementary world language program. One of the wonderful outcomes of e-learning is that since we went home, our FLES teachers created a first-class FLES site where they housed all of their lessons. Our elementary program is so different, teachers were required to make almost every lesson from scratch. Now this site is a great opportunity for all to see what we do and why we are so different. Our units are based off of the social studies concepts at each grade level. Although our goal is to be in the target language 98% of the time when we are in school, You will notice that in these lessons, teachers do use English to support student understanding at home. At 6th grade, students are able to make a choice and continue to study Spanish or switch and take French, Latin, or Mandarin. The choice they make in grade 6 is the language they must study for their 3 years at Sachs Middle School. As they transition to high school, they are once again offered an opportunity to continue the study of their language, switch, and begin a new language, or at this level, they may study 2 languages simultaneously. I am humbled and honored that the New Canaan Public Schools is one of the few, if not the only district in our area that has established board goals that support the use of a language other than English. The language of this goal reminds my department that our objective is to help each of our students to be able to use a language other than English to communicate at a specific proficiency level as defined by our professional association, ACFL. The first portion of the board goal asks that we monitor the number of students that are enrolled in a world language at New Canaan High School. As you can see, our percentages have remained consistent over the last few years. In the past, we were asked to inquire with students as to why this percentage is not higher. Although students understand and value the use of a second language, due to scheduling, they are required to make difficult choices. There are only a certain number of periods in a day, and if they are interested in a different subject area or would like to learn about something different before graduating, they are at times required to drop their study of a world language and replace it with a different class. We expect these percentages to move up slightly as the state has imposed a 1-year world language requirement to graduate. Upon further investigation, we note that the highest drop in enrollment continues to be senior year. As we have noted in the past, most colleges and universities do require that students engage in the study of a world language for at least 3 consecutive years. These numbers reflect the university requirements. The second portion of the board goal asks that we take a look at the distribution of students enrolled at the middle school level. In years past, we have been asked to survey students to get a better understanding of the choices they are making. We were unable to conduct this type of survey this school year. In the past, however, students have consistently shared that it is the first time in their educational career that they are able to make a choice outside of music. Many feel that since they have been studying Spanish since kindergarten, this is a good time to try something new. Recently, the board added this component to our overall goal, monitoring the number of students who qualify for the Seal of Biliteracy. This school year, 54% of our seniors graduated with a Seal of Biliteracy on their transcript and on their diploma. Although the state is not collecting this information from each district, an informal survey of the districts in our DIRG show that our percentage is one of the highest, if not the highest, this year. The last portion of the board goal was one we were unable to work towards this school year. We traditionally administer the proficiency assessments at grade 8 in May. As I said at the beginning of my presentation, I began working on this year's presentation immediately following the July board meeting. One of the comments and suggestions we were given was to give students more opportunities to use their language outside of the classroom. After hearing some of the questions I received, I also realized that I and the department needed to do a much better job at sharing all of our successes we experience in the classroom on a daily basis. I was raised to work hard and to do my very best every single day. My parents taught me that my hard work would be noticed by others and that it was not my role nor my place to highlight my achievements. It is with this mindset that I have run my department for years. However, I have now learned that if I do not share the successes of our program, many will not even know we are here and that we are an active participant in the accomplishments of the New Canaan Public Schools. One of the first things we did in the fall was start a Twitter feed. This continues to be a little bit of a challenge as teachers wonder what is something they should post. Most of them think they need to work a little harder and that their student performance could be a little better before it can be shared with the outside world. This humility is what makes us such a hardworking, cohesive team, and yet the same characteristics make it so difficult to post daily classroom experiences. The elementary team applied to present at our State Professional Association conference in the fall. I am so proud of them and cannot wait to hear if they were chosen. To continue to promote our elementary program, plus teachers joined forces with the recreation department and offered before and after classes at the elementary level. They were also ready to teach a Spanish class this summer at the summer enrichment camp. However, now that it is online, they have decided to wait until next school year. To promote their program, the Sachs Latin teachers did a few things that were different. During e-learning, they created and shared a choice board to the grade 2 teachers that were engaged in a unit on Rome. During the school year, these same teachers ran an after-school club at Saks on classical mythology that involved using virtual technology to travel through time. At the high school, we reinstated the National Honor Society in Spanish. In the fall, we plan on reinstating the National Honor Society in Latin, Mandarin, and French. We feel strongly that students that have committed to the study of their language for their entire high school career be given an additional opportunity to have their efforts and achievements celebrated. At the middle school, the French teachers asked one of our French families to make a video at home of the family making crepes. After watching the video narrated in French by this wonderful family, students learned about Chandeleur, a celebration in February where the French people traditionally eat crepes. And of course, we were able to buy them crepes from Mélie Melot in Greenwich. Middle school Mandarin students learned all about the Moon Festival and then made their own moon cakes. Students were so excited about this experience, they were still talking about it in the spring. And finally, after watching a wonderful Spanish dance program, students traveled into town and learned all about Peruvian cuisine at Pesca. What a wonderful way to remind students the Spanish-speaking world is only as far as downtown New Canaan. One reason I am so grateful that my world language staff is independent and hardworking is because I find that I spend a significant amount of time with English language learning students, meeting about EL students, providing PD on EL students, looking for resources for students, etc. Although the number of students in district has not changed significantly in years, their backgrounds have. Students now are not only diverse in culture and language, they are diverse in their educational experiences as well. What all EL students have in common, though, is that parents chose specifically to move into town because of our schools. Some have done so at financial sacrifice, but one they are happy to endure if it means their children will be well educated. We often forget how blessed we are to truly have a wonderful public education system here in the United States. The same cannot be said of all countries. Some students that have attended school consistently attended schools that were only half day and did not offer rigorous programs. These students move here and have to work twice or 3 times as hard as their peers to complete similar tasks. Our job in the L department is to help teachers make their lessons accessible to students and to help students navigate this new culture and new educational system in a way that will help them be successful. As you can imagine, we also provide direct instruction of English and help the students transition into schools, make friends, and participate in as many activities in and out of school as they can. One of the benefits of being both the L and World Language Administrator is how I can integrate both programs. If you recall the feedback you gave me about having students use their second language in authentic ways, the L students and their families were the answer I was looking for. To support student listening comprehension of authentic language being used, we asked L students and families to create videos and audios to use in world language classrooms. This was such a great idea and helped families feel included and valued. We also invited these families and students to come to school and be guest speakers in world language classrooms. Students were amazed that families understood their questions and that they could understand the responses. This has helped us build confidence in our students and a belief that they are able to use the language. Some L students are from specific countries that we are studying in our elementary classrooms. We asked these students to create videos to be used in social studies classrooms. For example, we have a wonderful social studies unit in grade 4 in Africa. The students were amazed to learn that one of our L students is from Ghana, and they were thrilled to hear from him. And finally, at specific levels in high school, we invited our L students and families to come in and participate in our performance tasks. We did not allow them to speak in English, and our students were expected to collect information from them by asking specific questions. A lot of work went into creating and implementing e-learning lessons. This was a huge undertaking on behalf of all teachers. Although some students did well with the transition, most students missed the daily interactions with peers at school, the opportunities to see teachers and spend the day in an environment that is vibrant, fast-paced, and engaging at different levels. You can imagine the impact to L students was significant. Many, if not most, stopped speaking in English. Some, who had not made close friends, have spent this time at home truly alone. Learning alone is hard for anyone, but for someone who does not speak English, who cannot easily navigate the technology, who counted on the support of a teacher to break down a task, this transition to e-learning was especially challenging. Krista Rizzuti, my ELL specialist, and I did our best to divide and conquer. Krista immediately began connecting with kids virtually, sometimes up to 1 hour a day, 3 times a week. Some kids just wanted to talk to us, to see us, and we understood. Here's a picture of Krista and her student having fancy day after reading Fancy Nancy. I met with students who didn't actually need help, just wanted company. We found that it was not just about teaching them English anymore. We now had to walk them through every little task in detail. Some students required that we sit with them all day long. Each day I would meet kids virtually in the morning and keep them on the back of my screen all day. If they texted me that they needed help, I'd switch over and help them and answer any and all questions. As time went on, we needed more help. We enlisted the help and support of anyone that was willing and able. One of the van TAs offered to check in on a specific family she transported so that the student and the mom had someone to talk to over the course of the week. Our own Spencer Reeves became an integral part of our student support team. One of our high school students, Chella Cove, asked if she too could help out and decided to spend her senior internship with us. And our very own Mary Calabrese logged on at different times of day to make sure that students knew someone was there if they needed help, and often played Pictionary or charades with them as well. Finally, my son enjoyed playing categories, Pictionary, and headbands with kids as well. I am certain you see the pictures of L students wearing Clemson gear. Although it's not relevant to the presentation, it's always important to highlight Clemson whenever you can. I was not one of those people who always knew they wanted to be a teacher. It was actually my dad's idea. After I didn't do well in my accounting classes as I expected, I tell my staff every day I really do not feel like I am half as effective a teacher as they are. But here is what I do know. I love what I do every day because I am here to serve. I'm here to help my staff be the best that they can and to support them in any way I can. I'm here to do the same for every L family that moves to town. And so I must thank you for allowing me to do what I do here in New Canaan.
Okay, thank you, Ms. D'Amico. That was an amazing presentation. And I think a few of us are feeling emotional after watching that. It's just really touching to see all the amazing work that's happened over the past challenging 4 or 5 months. So thank you to you and to your staff. I'll open it up to questions or comments. Brendan?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. And I liked the presentation format. Did you find doing distance learning that there was some technology that you could use that that you might actually find helpful in the classroom going forward once we get back into the classroom?
So actually we found quite a few things. So if you saw Flipgrid as a parent, so the teacher posts a question and then the kids can turn on their cameras and just answer it. And at the end, all the kids' answers are sort of cataloged. So we've used that a few times in world language. One of the things we did was we asked a question that middle school kids would have to answer, but actually asked high school kids to answer it so that it was modeled for them at different proficiency levels, which was very interesting for the kids to see, like sort of a future version of themselves. And then we also just used it as different tasks, right? So that they could see each other throughout the course of time. We also, though, what I like about Flipgrid is you can actually post it and different teachers nationwide can answer the same question as well. And so we were able to do that, and then the kids could hear different accents and just different ways of answering the simple question, even just what are you wearing today, right? And then just sort of hearing the different answers. So that's one. This Screencastify has been great because teachers have recorded themselves teaching a concept, and the kids said they loved it because they can stop it, like Brian was saying, hear it again, start their homework, and then I don't actually understand it, let me go back. So instead of having to wait for the teacher, it was an opportunity for them to sort of see if they could just hear the same lesson again before they reached out to the teacher. So that we've used that a lot. And then some different online, like we use linked language. It allows kids to record their voices and the teachers can use it to assess them. So there are some few things that we plan on using, you know, hopefully even when we're back.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sherry?
Great presentation, Lizette. Thank you. And I thank you for highlighting the many, many different opportunities for students to use the languages outside of the classroom. I think that's a terrific I have a question. You highlighted the drop-off in senior year, and I'm curious, and you analyzed that that's mostly because colleges require 3 continuous years of foreign language, and so students are opting out of that 4th year. But I'm also wondering how many students are affected by they don't have a class to take. So I know that happened with my daughter, who was in AP Spanish her junior year and didn't have a class senior year. And I'm just wondering, what is the size of that population that actually kind of are maxing out of the world language system in that senior year?
So we actually changed the courses at the top for kids just like that. So we took the number off of AP. So in the past, AP was considered a level 5 class. And so we didn't have, to your point, a level 6 class. So we talked to the colleges and they said, you don't actually need a number next to the AP. So it's now just called AP language. And so then we also took the number off of the UConn class, and we took the number off of the film class, and we are actually going to offer AP Lit this year. So we actually have multiple levels now after AP language. You can take them in those orders. You can take UConn and then AP language. You can take AP language and then UConn. You could take AP language and then AP Lit. You could take film. So the only thing that you can't take is you can't take film your junior year because some of the videos that they watch are rated R. So they have to, we would prefer they be seniors when they take that.
Okay, so just to clarify, so these courses you're mentioning are Spanish courses? I'm
sorry, yes, they're Spanish. So we do have the same for, actually we have the same for Latin, and we have AP Latin and the UConn, we have the AP UConn class. So we took the numbers off of those. We took the numbers off of the French. We also offer AP French and AP UConn. Yes, I'm sorry, French UConn and the AP French. The only thing we don't offer is Chinese. That most of the kids that make it to 5, we consider it just a 5 honors class. We don't run an AP class.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments?
I just want to commend Lizette and her staff for all the outreach over the last few months when we did close. So every family obviously faced challenges as we went into the unknown, but her population with the ELs are certainly more vulnerable than most, and they didn't hesitate to jump into the need there, fill that gap, and take care of those kids and those families that really needed it. So just want to say thank you, Lizette. It really made a huge difference for a lot of kids, a lot of families. And in many ways, I say that, the school district sort of put the community on its back and carried people through what was going on. And Lizette and her department were in the vanguard of that. So thank you.
Deanna.
Sorry, I didn't jump in fast enough, but I also, Lizette, thank you. What you and your staff did for these kids this last few months has been, heroic. So thank you. I just wanted to ask you, is there something, because, we don't know what we're going to face in the fall, and we may be in, we may be out, and, so you have one of the more at-risk populations on your plate. And are there things that, either staff or resources that you didn't have in the spring that would be beneficial in the fall?
So I think over time we got to sort of where we needed to be, and that's just more hands on deck. One of the things that I've already been talking to Jill about is, just identifying who are the TAs in the building, who are the secretaries that the kids have connected to, it doesn't matter who you are. The kids just need a friendly face. And sometimes it's just logging on to say, hey, I'm here and I'm gonna come back in 20 minutes. And that's all they need, because then they'll stay there for 20 minutes. And that's actually what Mrs. Calabrese was doing towards the end, was just checking in. And sometimes, she'd be yelling into an empty room. And then suddenly he's like, okay, I'm here, but he knew to be sort of close by, and some of the kids just need that. A lot of the kids are by themselves. And so having that is important. We are servicing the neediest students over this summer. We were going to run an ESL summer school kind of enrichment class, but it was just too difficult to go virtual. And so we've just decided to continue their services over the summer. We see them 3 times a week for 30 minutes. And so I just think that continuity and the consistency is what they need. You know, I think if we can be in the fall will be so helpful for them to make deep connections. And again, it really doesn't matter who you are. It's just, you know, being there for them. That's one. I think that's a huge one. And then the district was great with supports as far as technology. I mean, I think Ian was ready to kill me at the end, but I'm like, his computer still doesn't work. You know, his computer still doesn't work. And, you know, and again, to his credit, Ian was like, okay, short of, I'm gonna have to like send Victor there. Like, I don't know what else to do, but, you know, because you're trying to explain, like I'm on the phone and I'm like, okay, he says to do this. You know, and, you know, he's like, what? But so it's hard to answer that, Dan. I do think, I think we'll be better off because now we know what to expect. They know what to expect. And again, the fact that we're with them now is consistent. We didn't even change the platform. We're still using Google Meets just in case we weren't going to use Zoom. So that's just what they're using. They know how to log on. They, you know, they sort of, again, just have that expectation, I think. But thank you for asking. It's really people more than money. I don't need that. I just need people.
Yeah. Well, if there's any, you know, I mean, I know that there were, you know, parents organizing, you know, students, like kind of like Spencer with, you know, if there's more of that, you know, we can help with, or, you know, I think that that's a great one, socializing opportunity, but two, you know, a way to spread resources and maybe give kids a great opportunity to interact. And the only other question I wanted to ask was, because you may have said it and I may have missed it, is how many languages are you servicing?
For ESL?
Yes.
So this year we had French students, Spanish speaking students, Portuguese speaking students, Chinese students. We had Russian students, Ukrainian students, Korean students. I think that's it. The student from Ghana speaks Twi, which is a dialect. So.
Eight languages. Okay. All right.
It was tough. That Chinese student that Spencer saved us, truly, by the way, truly saved and continues to save us, just so we're clear, literally moved in right before we went home. And so when I tell you nothing, like it was like, we were trying so hard. And then it was like, just hold on. I'm like, Spencer, please, could you come on? And like in 2 seconds. And then I'd be like, all right, I just spent 30 minutes. I got nowhere. And Spencer's like, so he was so great. And then actually Chella, I don't know if you guys know Chella, but Chella knew Spencer from Mandarin classes. And so they introduced each other to Nathan, and then it was so great because then she was able to help out too. And they loved it because they were able to use their Chinese.
That's great. Okay, thank you again.
Julie, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I guess maybe more of a comment. So just to, as from a personal perspective, yeah, it was very rewarding for Spencer, and I just commend you on the resourcefulness of, you know, reaching out and finding different people. And I wondered, and I'm sure, you know, it's overwhelming trying to think of who could be sort of the mentors for these kids or whatever. And I just wonder if maybe tapping into like the National Honor Society, or maybe the, you know, now that you're creating the National Honor Societies for the different languages, obviously doesn't meet all of the languages of all of your students, the native languages, but you know, that might be an option too, kind of like their buddy for the year or something like that, you know, and just a way for kids to connect and build relationships. Just a thought, but
I usually call the National Honor Society. They're great at tutoring the kids on academic things, actually at the high school. So they're wonderful. And then yes, absolutely. That is one of the things I'm hoping the language National Honor Society kids will do. And trust me, I'm not shy. If you walk by me one day and say, you speak Russian, and I get a new kid, I'm calling you. You know, I mean, you know, I met a priest and he spoke Filipino, and then a kid moved in and I was like, wait, what? I'm like, hold on. I'm like calling this guy. like, can you come to school? I'm like, I need you to translate. I just, like, it takes a village, and I'm going to invite you into my village if you happen to walk by me. So,
well, that's great. And as you say, it's the personal connections that are so important for everyone. Important. That, you know, that especially these children are missing when they're isolated by language, as well as, you know, home. So thank you for all that.
Absolutely.
And I would just add my thanks. And I love how you partnered with the community, like the restaurants and the local businesses. I think it's such a great example of, you know, how to partner with our community and allow the kids those enriching experiences and allow our businesses to connect to our schools. So yeah. I love that. And I hope, you know, given the year ahead, it may be harder, but I hope we can continue that in the future.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, Lizette, you also have the distinction of being our first academic presentation since the COVID shut down and everything else. And you set a high bar for the rest, so thank you.
Well, did you tell them that I'm the one who reminded you? I always present in July. Yeah.
Well,
so
you say remind, I say volunteer. I said you just volunteered. I didn't.
Every July. So, you know, in May, I was like, I'm in July, right? Jill just kept laughing at me. I'm like, all right, well, here's my presentation.
We're all set. We're ready to run through our list now.
Yep.
I have a model to watch.
Great. Lizette, now I will, you can sign off or I can make you an attendee, whichever is easier on your end. But thank you.
If you can make me an attendee, that would be great.
I will do that.
Watching. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Lizette.
Thank you. Thanks, Lizette.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, but since the close in March, everything we've been talking about and doing has been COVID related, financial related, you know, crisis related. And it's nice to touch base around, you know, the goals in the academic area and that information. It's enriching. So thanks.
Yeah. It's nice to hear some real world examples of, you know, things that happened during the e-learning time.
Yeah.
So, all right. I know another question on everyone's mind is enrollment. So, Darlene or Brian, did you want to say anything? Turn it over.
No, take it away.
I'll take it away. Good evening, everyone. Oh, and that's Bailey. Sorry. Just in time.
You
just wanted to let you know that Brian, Jill, and I continue to meet with the committee and meet regularly. When last we met and I gave you an update was in the end of June. So we met again on July 7th. And we're continuing to monitor withdrawals, newly registering students, and kids that are moving across our schools. And in terms of the totals, when last we met, our total for the elementary enrollment was 1477, and was 1477. My grandson just walked into the room. And today we are at 1491, which is an increase of 14 students. Our SACS total was 1345 in the end of June, and currently it's at 1347, so an additional 2. And our high school total had been at 1362, and we're currently at 1356, so down 6. All in all, in June, we were looking at a total district enrollment of 4184, and we are currently at 4194. That is not including the preschool, so that's an increase of 10 students overall. One of the most important things that we all look at is class size, as you're well aware. And in combining some of the increases that we had on the elementary level in terms of sections, grade level sections at particular schools, some of our class enrollment numbers were relatively high. So we had made the decision a little while back to add 2 teachers on the elementary level. We have not placed those 2 teachers yet. We are looking at the East Kindergarten, which was slated to have 5 sections. and may end up needing 6. It's a total of 105 students, which puts us at 21 students per section. The other area that we're looking at is at South School, grade 4. We have 115 students. That puts us at 23.4 per section. We're also watching grade 2 at South, which is a total of 117 students, and that puts each section at 21.3. In terms of the NESDEC projections, as I said, our enrollment currently on the elementary level is 1491. Our NESDEC projection was 1497. Our SACS enrollment currently is 1347. Our NESDEC projection was 1319. At New Canaan High School, we are at 1356, and the NESDEC projection was at 1349. So again, our total is currently at 4194, and our NESDEC projection, it's hard to say that 6 times, is 4165. So not too far away in terms of what we were thinking. And as I said, a total increase of 10 students, but some complications on the elementary level. So we're monitoring that really closely. The other thing that I just wanted to let you know is that we're taking a proactive approach in terms of long-term subs, just in case we have teachers who are ill. We are looking at adding some long-term subs that we have a history with, that we know work well with students, and that we know have the technological abilities to be able to pick up for a teacher who might be ill, hoping this doesn't happen, but trying to definitely be proactive about that. We're also pretty vigorously pursuing more substitutes in general, which has always been a focus for us over the course of this year. One of the things that we did see in the month of June was 20 applications. Typically we get between 3 and 5 a month. So there are a lot of people who are looking for substitute positions, which is a new situation, and it's a good one. I've been interviewing a couple this morning, and we really want to get them in and get them on our rolls so that we have backup adults who can assist us should we have any issues. Hopefully none of that will happen, but that's where we currently are.
Okay. Brendan?
Thanks, Darlene. That was great. Just a question. So I think I heard you say we're 30 above the NESDEC projection. I think last year we ended up around 50 ahead of the projection. Does anyone remember? Was that about right?
I actually don't have last year's NESDEC in front of me, but I do have our actuals for last year, which were 4166. And the NESDEC projection was 4165.
For last year? So last year, our kindergarten came in about 50 or so above the projection. All at local in that one grade, which put some stress on the resources there.
Right. Okay. That's great to see things trending in the right direction. Just one question. You know, as we look at the next school year, are we finding you know, any sort of level of, you know, question or discomfort from our faculty just around, you know, returning to school, just based on their particular concerns or health issues, things like that?
You know, I haven't gotten any recent feedback. The thing that I would say to you is there definitely were more retirements this year. And I think I mentioned to you earlier on that typically we were in the 3 to 5 range and we had 11. I have had a little bit of feedback about from teachers who are worried about whether there will be childcare. That hasn't impacted, you know, whether they're saying they are able to work, but people are just curious about that and, you know, obviously concerned. But, you know, major feedback on the perspective about not coming back. I have had a lot of dialogue with Vivian and Rana, our teacher union president and vice president. We're keeping in pretty close contact at least once or twice a week. So I feel like we'll have some good feedback should some emerge. I don't have any today.
Okay, thank you.
So I can just share a little bit on that same question, just that and the teachers that I've spoken with, and a number of them participated in the 9th in the conversation and listening session that we did around reopening. Many of them they're waiting till we get a little closer. They want to understand the model.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a couple reach out to me, not many, but a couple reach out with specific concerns around their own, maybe their own issues with being immunocompromised. But beyond that, right, we're not surveying families or teachers at this point around return plans, because we want to first be able to articulate what those plans are so they understand what they're making a decision about. So we'll know that in a couple more weeks, we'll have more information about all that.
Annie?
Thank you.
So thanks for that update. And I just wanted to say I'm really supportive of the effort to add those 2 elementary teachers. From the feedback that we got, it was particularly hard for the younger students when we had to do distance learning. And I think setting up the year so that we're at the right size of grades for those younger years is really important. So I'm pleased that you all went ahead and slotted those 2 extra teachers in.
Deanna?
So I just wanted to follow on with what Brendan had said earlier, and just to make sure I understand. So this past year, we were probably up 30, I don't know exactly what the year-over-year increase was for this period, for the 2019-20 school year. But now we're looking at another, is it correct, 30 over this year, or this past year. So for 2021, we're plus 29 or plus 30 from 1920. Is that correct? In the full, the full enrollment.
The total number of students?
Yes.
Year-over-year comparison. Dar, do you have that right there? You want me to pull
So the total in 1920 was 4166.
Right.
We're at 4194 as of today.
So yeah. So we're at so 28 students.
28.
Wait, no, 30. Yeah. So I just wanted to, and unfortunately I don't have it in front of me, but there's that, and maybe we'll have it in October or whatever. But I look at that, I think about that graph, that like 10-year graph that we always, have, where they were kind of showing a slow, we always use the word flattening, but it was a modest decline, a couple students here or there. And it doesn't look like that's, I don't know if you've done any overlay on that recently, but just listening to what you're saying, it doesn't sound like that's bearing out at all.
I think that's accurate. It's not bearing out, and it's not bearing out in the region. We're hearing from our towns around us that they're also seeing, for those that were going where it was bearing out, they're seeing a turnaround. So there's, we're a little concerned about a labor shortage. So we are be aggressively going into the market to shore up those long-term subs that are certified positions, and we're really saying, look, hire people that you'd want to be teaching in your classroom if you can, because that need may arise. We may need to shift them right over. We've heard of some of our neighboring towns hiring double digits new teachers right away. So it's not moving in that direction. I think that the out-migration of the city is accelerating it for us, but we never saw it really significantly moving the opposite direction. As a matter of fact, over like 5 years, I think we're going to be plus minus 6 kids at the end of those 5 years, according to projections, and we're above projections now.
Brian's right. I meet weekly with my colleagues, the HR directors in Fairfield County districts, who were reporting out that typically they had been laying off elementary teachers in the last several years. And in fact, actually one of the towns reported having to add 5 elementary sections. Another one was adding 3 elementary sections. So Brian's right.
And I think one of the other efforts that we're doing as well is we're looking at all the certifications of our non-certified staff. So we also have TAs that hold certifications in a variety of areas, whether it's a K-6 or whether it's a content, knowing that we may need to move a TA into a long-term substitute position. We're also looking at people that are cross-endorsed. So somebody might hold a social studies and a math certification. So it's, once again, having all of that at our fingertips so that we can be proactive as we move forward and continue to plan so that our students continue to get certified teachers in front of them as part of their instruction.
So, and just as a follow-up on that, you know, sort of in the discussion of the possible teacher shortage, you know, sort of a comment that gets made regularly around turnover is that you know, have a senior level staff member who leaves and then you're able to replace them with sort of a you know, a new teacher, maybe straight out of school. You know, how are we finding that kind of hiring? I don't know how much of the 11 you've been able to replace so far and how many you need to hire, but sort of if you were to sort of look at the pool and how you're having to hire, are we seeing those fresh new faces at the lower end of the pay scale, or are we having to, you know, are we getting more experienced teachers? And, you know, so I just, if you could give some comments.
I've been doing a lot of interviewing lately, and I guess my response to you, Deanna, would be what it typically is. In some of the shortage areas, the people that we're getting are very skilled and have a lot of experience. And so, you know, we aren't saving as much as we might like to. Where we can, in some of the elementary hiring, there are some younger teachers, yes.
I just like to remind people that we had a, you know, 550,000 plus year-over-year cut in our budget with, you know, in the environment we're in. So I just think it's important to understand sort of what we're dealing with.
Carl?
Yeah, John just touched upon it. Maybe you could elaborate on progress on filling those 11 spots, those retirees that we honored the last time we gathered, who'd been here for 37 and 40 years, et cetera.
I wish I had the list in front of me, but I think what I could say off the top of my head is we are at least 75 to 80% hired. So the administrative team was pretty vigorous and quick to act. We were all concerned, knowing that it's difficult enough to find good teachers. It's even more difficult this year. So we may have 2 or 3 left to hire, but I, as recently as this morning, was hiring gifted teachers. So we're all set.
Teachers for our gifted program. All of our teachers are gifted.
I knew you were going to say that after. I knew it.
Yeah, I thought you were saying gifted teachers.
Yeah.
The challenge program.
That's what I thought you meant.
And that was one that we were worried about. So, and all of the high school teachers are hired. And most of the elementary, yeah. We're almost there. I think we have a part-time math position open and maybe 1 other or 2 others that I can't remember what they are, but we're almost there.
All right.
That's great. I guess my comment or my question is, as we think about scenario planning across in-person learning, hybrid learning, and potentially going back to remote, and after hearing Lizette's presentation, I mean, do you feel that in any scenario we have what we need in terms of resources? Because I think that's the big question is, can we support our students in the best way possible, given what we have or will have, at the start of the school year?
I'm sure that this is an interview question that's asked before I meet candidates, but one of the ones that I focus on with all of them is that topic. And I actually made myself a little note this morning to talk to Jill, and I didn't get to it today, but I think we're in a really good place in terms of who we have. I just want to make sure that whoever's coming on, including some of the substitutes, have some of the technological training that they might need in order to be able to assist our teachers with distance learning. So, that's the only thing that I think we need to possibly take a look at.
And we are offering professional learning throughout July for teachers. And we're actually in a place where some of our professional learning can be done remotely. So as far as all of the Schoology and learning how to access Schoology and set up courses, we have that all designed so high school teachers could actually do that at their own pace throughout the summer. And then we're also offering summer in professional learning on asynchronous and synchronous, what's the difference, in blended learning. So we are offering a lot of professional learning right now for our teachers throughout the month of July, and we'll continue to do so in August.
We also have all of our guidance counselors hired. I'm just trying to remember the last week. We're all set at the high school and at Saks.
What's the participation been in the professional learning, in particular with respect to the online tools? That's interesting.
So we start our courses next week, but we've had active participation all summer long. Even from a curriculum writing perspective. So the teachers have really been engaged. We had a huge group of teachers that really worked on curriculum writing during the month of June, and then have moved right into some work during July. And the professional learning has been well attended. Teachers are taking advantage of it. They also have learned how to enjoy that virtual opportunities of doing those online courses, because we were doing that throughout the distance learning on those half-day Wednesdays and half-day Thursdays. And so they've kind of grown accustomed to that. They also like the opportunity to take things at their own pace. So we're just trying to offer a variety for the teachers. And I think what we're trying to think about in July with some of the new programs that we're rolling out is, is it having a couple teachers actually in the building, in different places in the building, so that if a TI or somebody needs to get over to them to really show them and work with them, like in front of them, we'll have that opportunity to do as well. So we're giving teachers a variety of options to meet all of their needs.
I guess I don't need to have that note, just talk to Jill tomorrow.
You're all done. One thing off your list for tomorrow morning.
Awesome.
And Katrina, just to go back to your question briefly, it is very important. It's that push and pull between, needs and resources and resource availability. Without a doubt, we have to be we're always very aware of, we have to be even more aware of class sizes this year as we're going into whether we're all in or hybrid or even all out and remote, regardless of that environment. If we can bring everybody in the beginning, which we're hoping to be able to do, we've got to be aware of the class sizes and the facility and the distancing and everything else that goes in it, the cohorting, all of that. So there's a push and pull on that. We're talking about that every day around staffing, because it really is, when you talk resources, there's all the training and everything we're going to go very deep on, and it's a wonderful program developed and being refined, but it's also that the number of bodies, the human resources, because that's, as you know, teaching and education is a people business. And so there is a push and pull there that we continually look at, and we'll keep talking about.
Julie? Thank you.
Yeah, so I just to follow up on the professional learning for either Jill or Darlene. So our teachers specifically asking for specific things, like, what you guys have created for them, are they coming to you and saying, we'd really like to have more work on this? Or, was that from feedback that they've given you, or just things that you already had, knew that teachers needed further development on? Or how are you sort of planning that out?
So at the high school level, one of the most important things is getting all the new teachers up to board on Schoology. So, you know, that's really what we're working on with all those new teachers, because they've missed a whole year of professional learning. We spent an entire year training our staff on how to run courses in Schoology. And now we're at a place where we really need to move forward to make sure that there's consistency and equity with utilizing Schoology across the district. And you'll see some of this coming up in our district goals. And then certainly it's moving forward with our K2 and the platform that we're going to be using in that grade. And then the rest has really been about the blended learning. So when do I do asynchronous? When do I do synchronous? What are some things that I want to get in place and feel more confident with before I move into the upcoming school year?
So you got good feedback from the teachers in terms of, I mean, obviously you know what the new teachers need, but like from current teachers, what they want more of.
Exactly. And some of it is really going back and looking at their units of study and trying to map that out and figure that all out as well.
Okay, thanks.
And I just learned something that maybe nobody here knows that I'm happy to share. I just learned that the Dalio Foundation has agreed to underwrite the ruler training for all Connecticut teachers in the summer, which is normally, it's very expensive. But for any teacher that wants to sign up, it's a couple of days, all virtual, I believe, and it's going to be underwritten by the Dalio Foundation statewide. So I should get more information about that next couple of days. But we've been talking and thinking also around SES and emotional and mental health, and this will go a long way in helping around training for that too.
Great news.
Yeah, I was looking for surprise on Jill's face because she normally knows things before I do, but this might be one I knew.
I just know a lot of people at the state.
Yeah.
They hear my voice a lot.
My first
name basis there. Oh, it's that Jill from New Canaan again. What does she want now? No.
Okay, so I think actually this is a good segue into our next agenda topic, which is a review of the distance learning survey. Dr. Letzi.
Yes, and despite my efforts, I could not download this because it's still in a it's in a website only, and Hanover's working to put the reports together for us. So I'll share the screen on the portal, and you can take a look at that, and we'll talk about a couple of highlights. But once we get the full report from Hanover, I'll get that out to you right away, and we can workshop that, talk about that in a different way, whatever makes sense. Once I pull it up, you'll understand what I mean. We probably already understand. Let's see. Oh, give me one moment, I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay. Can you see that okay?
Looks good.
Yep. Okay. All right. So to get to this, it was a login through a portal, and what you'll see as I click through it a little bit, it really is just it's the Excel spreadsheet here on the bottom, essentially, or whatever it is that they're using. But you can see some of the questions and results, and I think there's a couple of high-level takeaways we can talk about briefly. But I do want to do a deeper analysis, and once we get the data from them, collated a little bit differently, we'll be able to do that. So here you can see there's 2,300 respondents, pretty balanced between the elementary and the secondary results, 1,150 versus 1,200. And then you see the number of parents, obviously the number of parents, number of students, the 403. Students grades 7 through 12 were invited to participate in it. So obviously there's no students in pre-K 6. Pretty balanced with teachers as well, 100 elementary, 117 secondary, and then the instructional staff. So you see sort of the breakdown. More parents at the elementary than the secondary, but a decent representation. So we asked them a series of questions, as you know. And, oh, I wonder if I have to log in again.
It was glitchy right before I came on, Brian, as well.
Was it?
Yeah.
All right, let's try this again. Yeah, I'm not loving it, but at least there's something. Okay, So I'll just get right to the meatier questions. And then again, once up, hopefully by the end of the week, they'll have this together in a format that we can share. One of the questions we did ask was about engagement in the distance learning experience. So if we look at the pre-K 6, parents only, question around, what was your child's level of engagement with the online remote learning materials? Obviously you see here, moderately engaged and above is about 80%. How much work did you spend? You see it increasing more than 4 hours per week.
Brian, this is pre-K through 6?
This is the pre-K through 6, yep. Parents, these are the parents' responses. And I think here, the bottom right-hand corner, this is something that we were talking about briefly. How often did your child need help or supervision in doing, during the distance learning? And this is, I think, a part of the reason why we wanted to segment out the pre-K 6 to the 7-12, because of some of the needs here. So you see that always 34%, often 27, and sometimes 24. So significant amount of time parents were helping their children during this. Now, I just want to, just for point of comparison, if you flip it, now this is still the parents, but you go to 7-12, you see a very different picture, right? And this is, again, 7-12, and you see it really just goes inverse, and you see never as, and rarely 65% of the time, sometimes often and never. So found that to be informative as we're thinking about, plans in the future, what have you. Maybe not surprising, but informative. If we go to the students here and take the parents off, again, the engagement levels, about the same, the 43%, moderately and much more, 20% or so, slightly or not at all engaged. The grading, and then if we jump, well, we can't jump over to the K-12. Well, let's see the teachers. And the teachers, when we asked the 7-12 teachers about engagement, pretty accurately, I think, reflects what the feedback was from the parents and from the students, 7-12. And then the grading, and if we go pre-K 6 teachers, the engagement seems to move from very to moderately. There's a little bit of a shift there. Again, I'll just show you the visual of that. Okay. Let's see. That was engagement 1, engagement 2. See if it comes up. Pre-K 6, we'll look at parents. Okay. Again, parents for pre-K 6, how often were you able to get help? Parents, teachers, sibling or family member. And then how often did your child engage in the following during the week? Most of the time working on teacher, provided assignments, and then you see the other options there. Again, that's the parent feedback. And now we'll go to 7-12, parent feedback. Parents were less involved, 7-12. I think that's a theme that you would expect to see. Teachers more involved, 7-12, then, well, yeah. Let's see. Again, teacher provided assignments with bulk of the time. And if we jump into the student responses, they're consistent. And then the teacher responses. The teachers reported all 3 of the above, that they were monitoring student progress, engagement, and attendance, which is true, because that was the expectation that we spelled out very early for all of them, and they did a wonderful job with it. And here's how the teachers are spending their time. So a lot of time recording or streaming lessons with kids, and that's, again, 7-12. And let's see if I can scroll up. It really doesn't change. Yep, that's 712. And that's pre-K 6. Okay. We also asked around the challenges that were experienced during the close. So if we go to parents, again, pre-K 6. The biggest challenge reported was the homework and activities required additional assistance. And that was more than half. And I think that's the same thing here below, required too much external work. Good showing for none of the above, which is a good thing because this is challenges. And you see that. So that's parents, pre-K 6, parents 712. I think that's good to note, you know, that they felt like these did not cause problems for them. The next is, you know, 25% reported out that the use of multiple platforms. So maybe one teacher using Google Classroom, another teacher using Schoology or whatever, but again, not a barrier necessarily, a challenge for some, but I think that's good. The taking the parents off, putting the students on, 712. Their biggest challenge was staying engaged in their learning and getting less guidance from teachers, less feedback from teachers. And you could argue for many that keeping up with due dates and deadlines is a problem in remote learning and in school. But you can see the different things there. And again, if we just jump into the teachers, these are 712. Largest professional challenges related to the move to distance learning and working remotely, maintaining a good work-life balance, and then engagement questions again. Adapting material, maintaining the communication, okay? And then clarity of expectations for online learning and childcare constraints. If we look at the elementary, similar from the elementary teachers. And again, it was pretty well balanced, about 100 or so teachers in pre-K 6 and 100 712. Okay. Obstacles to communication. We love this. Again, none of the above. One of my emails that I sent out, I got a note back. It was TL semicolon DR. Do you know what that means? Too long, didn't read. But I only got one. We try, and all of you many of you experienced it. I mean, our whole school community, our principals, central office, teachers really made an effort to communicate regularly with the community, with parents, with kids, and I think it really did. It made a big difference for people. Biggest concerns about coming back together, fully in-person instruction, ensuring social distancing, cleanliness to prevent an outbreak, face masks, ensuring that people wear face masks. Okay, and that's from pre-K 6 parents. We go to 712 parents, same 3 here. And again, none of the above at a resounding 58%. And you can see too many ways for communication. It's pretty balanced. And going to students, the inconsistent messaging and communication sent in too many ways. These are 712 students, right? And then biggest concerns, cleanliness, social distancing, and none. I don't have any concerns for. And then below that is, just below that is around masks, ensuring that people wear masks. And if we shoot over to our secondary teachers, challenges, many reported, you know, adapting the curriculum to distance learning, because I mean, it happened like that, as everybody knows. Creating the lesson plans and really it was bringing that experience over and doing it well. You know, our teachers take great pride in their work, and when we asked them to do this, and it was a challenge, but they wanted to make sure that they provided an excellent educational experience for the kids, best they could do. fall challenges, maintaining relationships and connections with kids, adapting the curriculum, assessing for student learning. Okay, and again, going down here, you see the same three as the parents at both the elementary and the secondary level: social distancing, ensuring students and staff wear face masks, and school cleanliness to prevent an outbreak. And those are our secondary teachers. Pre-K teachers, you're going to see, again, the same three here around those concerns. The messaging, that's for us to take a look at and dive deeper into. The adapting the curriculum, these are very similar. And these are similar. Maintaining the relationships and assessing students. Okay. Again, I know not the most efficient way to do this, but I'll get you the report as soon as we get it from Hanover. I just didn't want to wait too long. Your biggest concerns, this is everybody all in the elementary level: engagement with learning, social emotional well-being, loneliness, social isolation, which those two obviously are connected. And the third one is connected too: mental and emotional health, something that we've really been thinking deeply about and planning for. If we only look at the parents' responses, there it is. If we look at our teachers' responses, okay, there it is. And then if we jump to our 712, we do parents, engagement, loneliness, quality of online instruction, social emotional well-being, mental and emotional health. This is our students reporting, which I think is doubly powerful when we're asking them about their biggest concerns for themselves and their peers: engagement and learning, quality of online instruction, loneliness, social isolation, my mental and emotional health, my social emotional well-being. So that's directly from the kids or students. And then our teachers, as you would expect, their ability to support all their students is right up there. Making it work, being able to be fully present for their students as they're teaching from home when they have other competing demands. You know, we've said it's different when you walk into a school building. You can leave those other things outside the school door, but when you're working and teaching from home, it can be more challenging. And you see these other things here. Lastly, some future planning. Parents, what effect do you think school closures, remote learning will have on your child's readiness for school? Biggest concern was social skills. Lizette, I wish you were still here. Next, the world languages for our little guys. You know, the FLES and the program that they have. Emotional mental health, and you see the rest, here. Prior to the pandemic, was it your plan to use district transportation? Yes. If we do go to in-district, in-person instruction, would you use district provided transportation? You see a big shift, a 15-point swing, 15% swing with the parents. And that's about, what do we say the number of parents were here? Is it 1,000? I think so. It's about 1,000 parents. And then a large percentage that's unsure. So I think we need to give them more information on what that would look like and how it would run. But that was again, we'll get the numbers, but that's the snapshot question about transportation, just to get a sense of it. At the high school, the 7 through 12, middle school, high school, 712, 5344 here, but here 2751. So you see more people opting out, again, saying that they would not be using district transportation if we come back to full-time in-person instruction. And again, parents here, mental or emotional health, social skills at the top, and then the academic side. Jump to the students. And then for the teachers in 712, which of the following be most useful? The district offers staff to improve distance learning, professional development, right up there at the top, like we talked about before. Engaging students on converting offline lessons onto distance learning, sample lesson plans. It's all about that. And then their anticipated impact on kids. And finally, pre-K 6, similar results on both sides. Okay. Communication. See, I think people were satisfied with the communication. This is the parents pre-K 6. I think we did make a purposeful effort around communication, as you know. You see here, positive results. So I think I will stop it there and say that the moment we have the breakdown of it all, I'll be glad to share it with you. And if we want to do a workshop from there, I'm glad to do that too. The sort of couple of quick high-level takeaways, of course, the concern around engagement, the need for professional learning, the difference between the elementary and the secondary. I think that's worth going a little bit more deeply into, especially as we think about, certainly one of the models that we're being asked to create, one of the scenarios is a hybrid model. So we want to take some of the things that we've learned from this as well and consider, can it inform what that hybrid would look like? So we're working that through too.
Questions, comments, Julie? You're on.
Sorry. Brian, under the concern section, I can't remember, I mean, I did the survey, but how many choices could people choose? And how many selections could people choose? Could they choose as many as they wanted, or was it the top 3? I can't remember, but like, at least if you can have that data somehow on there too when we get it, just so we know how people could make selections.
Yeah, I believe it was choose all that apply, but I can double check that. I'll make sure we have that in the final report.
Okay, so we didn't have to order them or anything. It was just choose as many as you can. Okay.
I believe so.
Okay.
Let's see, maybe I can get to the question itself. No, I can't. I'll double check that, Julie.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Sherry.
So thanks for that, Brian. So I look forward to when we get the analysis so we can kind of dig down more into that data. But clearly one of the biggest concerns is, no surprise, the widespread concern about the lack of engagement, the loss of connection, the negative impact on students' mental and emotional health. And I guess a couple of things that for the reopening committee that I hope we're really looking at: one, how we might be able to survey more broadly the students when they come back to school, because I mean, we have 400 grades 7 through 12 students, but just on a broader basis, we know in this age group that very, very few students will raise their hand to a parent, teacher, or a counselor to say that they're struggling with stress or anxiety or depression or any of these PTSD effects that we're expecting may come out of this pandemic for some youth. So that I think we need to be thinking about, how can we survey that and identify, and then beyond that, just really be looking to help break through the stigma of the mental health and making sure that we've got support systems in place for students who need it. And, this may be some new supports that we need. Maybe it's after school groups, or, I don't know what the solution is, but I think, all of the experts and as well as the survey is showing us that our own students are feeling this and our parents are seeing this. So I just want to make sure that we're kind of all over this and this summer to continue to prep for that issue.
Yep. Yeah, and I wish you were here to speak to it, but Dr. Bliss has been really laser focused on this since really the close. And she's been a part of our conversations with the Connecticut Center for School Change and other groups, and she was with us on the 9th as well. It's a concern locally, statewide, nationally. Schools are so much more than places where kids learn to read and write. And so, how do we reengage? And I'm talking with the superintendents in the region about what you'd call a universal screening tool, something along those lines. But really, one of the things, the strong recommendations that's come out from the state that I think is spot on, is about the first lesson that you deliver to kids when they come back is to be one that gives you an opportunity to connect, to get to know your kids, to give them a sense of agency over their learning and success in what they're doing. You know, don't have kids come back and give them a test right away to see what they know or don't know, but really bring them back in and celebrate who they are, where they are, and give the teachers an opportunity to get to know them and them an opportunity to get to talk and know each other, and then go into a screening tool or whatever if you're going to do something like that. But really, there's a reacclimation process as well for our kids. So we're taking that guidance or those recommendations to heart as we're doing our work as well, so that when kids come back, it's not you're not jumping on a treadmill that's already running 100 miles an hour. You know, we're going to bring them back and sort of celebrate them and give them a positive experience and give them a chance to get to know their teachers and each other. So yeah, we're thinking it through on all levels. So thank you, Sherry.
Great, thank you.
There we go. My light's turned off. Sorry. I have to move more.
Any other comments? I would just add, I think all in all, the results are pretty positive in light of the, if we look back at the situation and the urgency at which we were thrown into this scenario. And I guess it's no surprise that, the recommendations from the American Association of Pediatricians and other organizations that are pushing, the socialization piece for students. And we're seeing that that's the case in the survey, that, to Sherry's point, the social isolation and the lack of social interaction, makes this made it really hard for so many of our families and students. So I just want to, say thank you and support all the great work that was done, because I think where we saw the areas of growth were sort of the uncontrollables, the things that really couldn't be controlled in given the situation. So I imagine, and I know that there's a lot of work underway to focus on those things.
Yeah, and maybe one blessing in disguise is when we first went out, we knew who we knew needed support, but we didn't know who we didn't know needed support. But as we went through that, we learned who those students and families were as well. So now we know. So when we are faced with a similar situation, at least we now have a better sense of some of those families that we didn't know about in advance. When school's in typical session, they didn't need support or help, but when something changes, they do, and we're much more aware of those families now, which is, I think, a blessing for us as we contemplate what's ahead.
All right, thank you. Next up is the calendar and the proposed changes to the August date.
Yeah, what I'd just like to bring to your attention briefly, doesn't need any action at this point. I just want to have a conversation, make sure that in our planning, as we put the plan together, we could probably take action at our next Board of Ed meeting if the board is agreeable to the proposal. But yeah, as you know, our timeline is such that communication to the state and reports that are due come at different times. So very quickly, let me give a quick overview of what we're thinking around timeline, and then we'll explain why we think this is a good idea and open it up for discussion. As you know, Thursday, we had a listening session, a Q&A with parents and board members and staff and others that were invited to come together to talk about, the state's reopening plan, what our efforts have been to date, and to really listen around concerns or thoughts or feedback around a variety of different things. So on July 24th, the state is requiring all districts, asking all districts to submit their reopening plans that really essentially detail out how districts will meet the requirements of the governor's school reopening plan, and provide some other information as well as appropriate. So we've begun working on that, and we'll be working on it throughout this week, and the board will have an opportunity to see it. The reopen committee will have an opportunity to see it, prior to anything being submitted. It's not at that point that you have to make final decisions around, exactly what would a hybrid look like, or what would this look like, or that. But it is the communication point where you need to share how you'll meet the recommendations around safety, around masks, around distancing, around cohorting, some of those things that are in the report. And it gives us an opportunity to sort of frame out what we're thinking as far as scenarios go for the return. Because in the report, you have to include all students back in full-time every day scenario, a hybrid scenario, and then a full remote learning scenario. So as we work those things through. After that's submitted on the 24th, the following week, July 27th through 31st, we're going to be hosting a series of webinars for parents and for teachers at each school. So off the top, it would be 10 webinars. We may wind up doing more than that. In that, we'll talk a little bit about the reopen plan specific to each school. We'll have the building administrators with us, and then also provide an opportunity for questions and answers. And I was just talking to my niece who's interning at Facebook this summer, and she shared that when they have town halls, they can post questions, and then if people upvote the question, then it becomes what they talk about and what gets asked. So, you know, of course, I asked her what platform do they use to do that, and she looked at me. And then I didn't need to hear the answer. And then thought maybe if we can figure out a way to do something like that with Zoom, we can run the town halls that way. So we'll maybe there's a polling feature and other things. So I think we'll be able to figure that out. But do it, share some info, do a Q&A with as many people who want to come to really get the information out there. The following week, 8-3 to 8-7, to survey our parents and our teachers to get, now that they know what the plans are, what would they think they'd be doing in the fall? And it's at that point, we'll try to nail down a little more around transportation too. So we do that week, and then really looking at final plans around August 12th or so, and really having that nailed down. Because again, once we know how many kids would be coming back and the teacher situation and all of that, we can finalize those plans. Of course, we'll have them in the works. With that pretty aggressive schedule, we looked at our district calendar, and back when we approved the calendar, the first day for the teachers was scheduled to be August 26th, which is a Wednesday. And generally, as you know, we have convocation on the Wednesday, and then meet and greets and some other things, and then professional learning Thursday and Friday. And we thought that provides an opportunity for us to shuffle some things around with our professional learning days and actually bring in our teachers beginning on August 24th. And if we can do that, we can capture 5 days prior to the start of the school year for professional learning, knowing what model we're going to be in, working through all of what it's going to take to help people to be comfortable and prepared for the reopening. We've got all the health and safety protocols, which are new and different, and we've got all the instructional work that has to be done and considered, best practices in a variety of different contexts. So if we could move 2 of the PL days up to the 24th and the 25th, and use that whole week, and then stick with the 31st on the Monday for the first day of school for kids, which arguably will look different. I don't want to get into details now, but as we think about the August 31st date, that first day back, we'll want to spend quite a bit of time working with kids around the protocols, around what health and safety, proper ways to wash your hands, and different routines that are going to be in place based on the context of the situation that we're in. So that even that first day, maybe the first couple of days, will look a little bit different as we kind of move into the instructional work. So I guess the question is around moving up those 2 PL days to be the 24th and the 25th, and bring our teachers back on the 24th.
Brendan?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the work that you're doing. I mean, it's actually, when you think about how little time there is between now and the beginning of the school year and all that you need to do, it's just mind-boggling. And so the fact that you're, even considering how to do all this is just really impressive. I can't, I work in the corporate world day to day, and I can't really come up with an analog for what school systems need to do to bring kids back to school. It's just, it's phenomenally complex. So I mean, everything that you laid out makes perfect sense to me. And I just commend all the work that all of you are doing to pull all of this off. The idea that we'd have, feedback from families 3 weeks ahead of when school starts, and we'd incorporate all that and develop a plan, 3 weeks later, so kids can show up to school and teachers show up, 1 week before that. It's just kind of amazing. So really appreciate it.
Deanna?
So I just had a question. So does that mean that the November, so I'm assuming if you take those 2 extra professional learning days, then we remove the other 2 professional learning days that are later in the calendar for teachers? And so one of them was, and that means the kids are off that day, and one of those is happens to be election day. So right. I just didn't know, you know, theoretically from a, you know, who knows where we're going to be in November, but from a, you know, safety and security, we typically don't want kids in the building on election day. So I wanted to understand a little bit more about how you're going to manage those days.
Sure. So the school would still be closed on the day, the thinking is that school would be closed on the days that we were going to have professional learning for kids and for staff. The election day is a different type of day in that, you know, it is traditionally a professional learning day statewide. So depending upon where we are when we get there, I think our conversation will and should be, do we keep that as a PL day for staff, knowing that it's really an important time in the year for them to take a look at data and do other work, and count that PL day that we're using as one of the 181st or the 182nd day, right? So we can still use those 2 days, the 181, 182, but I don't want to cross that bridge too early. So right now I say move the PL day up because we don't know what the context is going to be. If we're still in session in November and the PL day makes sense, we can do it. We'll talk about maybe reducing the student year by the 1 day and turning that day into the PL day for November. Does that am I saying that clearly? Okay. But again, I think it's premature to make that decision now because we just don't know what school is going to look like. So I think when we're mid-October, we'll have a good sense of where we'll be in November. And I think that'd be a good time to have that discussion.
So I guess we just need to make, you know, because parents tend to look at this calendar pretty closely. So I just think we need to make it clear that, you know, I mean, obviously this is a weird year, but I think we need to make clear to people that, you know, that a lot of these days could be shifting and moving around based on what's happening. And
sure. Yeah, but I can say with confidence that school will not be in session on election day. And whether or not that's a PL day will be dependent upon if school, you know, where we are in mid-October.
Do we have a contractual number of PL days?
We do, but we could work with the union if they were to agree to use the 182nd student day as that PL day. And Vivian and Rana are really, they agree and understand with the drive to train folks, you know, to help people to be the best in the classroom. And that's what PL is all about. So they're really good partners with that. But yeah, there's a contractual number of days in both, but that's where, you know, it would be that instructional day instead. We can make that decision.
Julie?
So you mentioned about Vivian and Rana. So how do they feel about, or how will teachers feel about coming back? I mean, obviously, I know teachers want more training and whatever, but in terms of coming back, you know, 2 days earlier, how is that being received?
Well, it hasn't been put out there yet, so I'll let you know how many emails I get tonight. No, I think generally, really, our teachers are asking for, you know, the opportunity to learn what they can and should learn to be as prepared as possible. So generally, you know, those 2 days leading up to it, I don't imagine many people are traveling. You know, it's the Wednesday. Often we come back on the Monday. So I think they'll be grateful for it, to be honest, for the opportunity to be in the space. And I mentioned before, we opened our building here at Central Office on Monday. And, you know, first couple of days, there's a timid approach, but people now are a little more comfortable being here and, you know, wearing their masks and doing what they need to do. And it does take a little time. And I think that the fact we closed so abruptly, shut down the buildings, having those couple extra days will help everyone to be comfortable and transition back in. So I think it'll be, if it doesn't work for a couple of folks' calendars and family schedules, I think the majority will be grateful for the time.
Sherry, did you have, or?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's crucial. I think that have those 2 days for preparation to make sure that you can really be sure that you're as prepared as possible. And I'm sure you're spending some time talking through, what happens if we get switched to a code yellow or code red after we start. So I think it's really important and strongly support it.
Deanna.
So I guess, you made the comment that because it is late in changing the schedule for the teachers, and I agree with everybody that, this is a year that we need that. But I also, there are, I don't know what people's personal plans are. And so if they have plans on the 24th and 25th, traditionally PL is not an option. And there are consequences. So how are we as a district planning to manage through sort of a last minute shift that could be impactful for the staff?
Mm-hmm. One of the things we've talked about briefly is being sure whatever we do is available virtually as well for people. So, we want people to come into their classrooms. We want them to start getting used to being in the building. But even the PL that we're going to be doing, they may be doing it virtually from their classrooms with all of their colleagues from other classrooms. So if people are traveling, there may still be a way for them to weave into the experience a bit by doing that. Worst case is if they're completely unavailable for those 2 days, we find ways to make up for it somewhere else. Whether it's recording the PL that we've done or other opportunities, but we find a way to make up for it. And you're right, it's not optional. And those are the days we all come back, and it's really important to do. But I think we'd have most really ready, especially if the travel ban is still in effect and the mandatory quarantine and all of that. I think that I'm optimistic that it would be well received.
Jen, you're on mute.
Just a quick question and a comment. So are we able to test all the teachers? Is it going to be mandated? Is it going to be suggested? I'm assuming that they would do that at some point before during those P&L days. And also just a comment on, and I know, Brian, we talked about this a little bit in our high school group last Thursday, but I know there's gonna be a lot of anxiety for kids coming back, and they've been listening about COVID for the past 4 or 5 months, and it's definitely scary in school. Like you were saying, you want to give them success and have connections, and I just think personally that it would be really great to have a little education about what it's going to be like before they actually walk in the doors. And I just think it's important that we don't spend the first week talking about COVID every single day, giving them something else to, having them start learning and engaging. And I don't know, it's just, the whole thing is scary, especially for the little ones, and to, have to talk about that, so hopefully we'll be able to keep that more, I don't know, I just would love to get that more before we enter the doors, so that they can start, starting their new year.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And we're rethinking our meet and greets, rethinking opportunities that we give for kids and teachers to connect and become familiar. So we'll keep thinking about those things, and our principals and our teachers are all thinking about what they could look like and how they could help students to reacclimate to coming to school. But when we do the webinars for the middle and secondary, we're going to do them for kids as well. We want to be able to have conversation with the kids and hear their questions and be able to get in dialogue with them for the Q&A there. But it's a really important point. And the question around testing. So we had testing today at Sachs Middle School, as I think you're aware. They tested 200 people in 2 hours, and they anticipate getting the results in 24 to 48 hours. So, since we began the testing with the health department months ago till now, we've always talked about trying a couple of different ways to see what's going to work, in part so when the time comes, we're prepared to go to scale with our staff, right? Because we're talking about 750 people plus with the staff and doing that. So we are considering that as part of our strategy to reopen, providing an opportunity for any staff member to be tested if they like. It's not mandatory, it can't be, but certainly I think that people, it's a peace of mind thing. The students as well, you know, it would be set up for any student who wants to go through and be tested the same way. So yes, we are seriously considering offering testing as part of the plan to return for our staff. Again, it goes beyond just faculty. It's all the staff in the building. You know, we would open up for all of them. There is, I think, cost is covered, if not by insurance, then under the CARES Act, I believe there's something there that helps for that purpose. So it would be cost neutral for the staff and available for them 2 weeks or so prior to the start. Okay.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Great. So positive feedback. Thank you.
All right, so now we can move on to our action items, and we have the first read of our district goals and objectives.
Yes, and I will pull these up and ask Dr. Carenti to give me a hand. I did send these to you about an hour or so prior to the meeting. And as you know, our district goals are foundational documents in our district. They really serve as the guideposts or sort of true north or compass, whatever you like. But it really does guide our actions. They flow from our beliefs, and they're actionable, measurable, and I think truly do communicate the things that we value. Oh, do you hear that echo? Let's see. Okay, better? Better, okay. So our goals are they're items that they're actionable, they're measurable, and they really do serve to reflect our beliefs as a district, our values as a district. So let me pull them up and we'll talk. This is a particularly challenging year, of course. I mean, you could have one goal, one word, you know, COVID, figure it out. But we don't want to do that. And, you know, as a school district, as you know, it's a very complex system, and we've got so much positive and powerful momentum going in so many ways that, you know, we had to do a hard shutdown in March. We didn't get to finish a lot of things that were underway. So some of them are staying the same, you know, as they were. Others, though, we did get to a place where we're ready to take the next step. And then you'll see that a few things have been added in. So what we'll do is kind of just talk about a couple of highlights. Traditionally, what has happened, we've gone over a couple of highlights in our first reading, publish it on the website as well. And then we have a substantive conversation for the second reading. And I mentioned to the board, if you'd like, that we could have a workshop or something else to get more specifically into one or all of the goals and objectives, if you like to do that. So okay, can you see that okay?
Possible
Yes.
to zoom a little?
I think so. Let's see.
Better, thank you.
Okay, how's that?
Much better.
Good. Okay. Does it matter at all if I do this? No. No. Okay. So as you know, our district, and I won't, you know, in the interest of time, just so we can get into the meat of it, we've been guided by 5 large goals for years, and those goals have served us incredibly well because, as I often say, you know, having goals articulated the way that we do, revising them annually, discussing them together, using them, it allows us and helps us to be sure that we're consistently taking steps in the same direction over time. And it allows us, it provides us the focus and empowers us to not be kind of buffeted around by the idea of the moment or the thing of the day, but really to, as we take steps forward, we continue to progress as a district in meaningful, important ways. So the first is we call it our teaching and learning goal. Second is our communication goal. The third is our professional practice goal. Fourth is our school climate and safety goal. And fifth is our stewardship goal. So that sort of encompasses the largest piece, and then these objectives underneath guide our work. So Dr. Krentz, you want to take it from there?
Sure. So as you'll see, goal number 1 is to increase student learning as measured by multiple and varied assessments to ensure all students graduate prepared for a dynamic and complex global society. And then we have our series of objectives and indicators that are underneath goal number 1. So we're going to obviously continue with district curriculum instruction and assessment will reflect local, state, national, and international standards and expectations. You'll see that many of these objectives haven't changed because we're continuing to work on them as we move into next year. As I looked at objective letter 8F, that indicator about the standard-based grading. Unfortunately, we were unable to complete that. I know that was something that the board had asked us to do to try to bring closure as to whether we'll move forward with standard-based grading at SACS or whether we're not going to move forward with standard-based grading. But we just really we ran out of time in completing our full study on standard-based grading and really gathering feedback from all those stakeholders. So we're going to continue to work on that next year. We had some great conversations as we were in distance learning, talking about standard-based grading, and at times we heard from teachers saying it would be great if we were in a standard-based grading situation right now because we'd be able to really mark progress for students on particular standards and give them more specific feedback to the work that they're doing in this distance learning, and that it was more challenging to just come up with that grade and get things into that grade book for them. So it was a great dialogue to engage in, but once again, we have not gathered all the feedback from all the stakeholders, and we really need to spend time doing that and have more in-depth conversation about that in the future. So we are going to continue with this indicator as we're moving into next year. The next two that are in red are brand new, and we really did have conversations about whether we should be making a specific goal around hybrid or remote learning. And as we had that conversation, we said, you know what? We want our kids to learn regardless of what the environment is. We want our kids to learn if they're in person, we want our kids to learn if they're in hybrid, and we want our kids to learn if they're in remote. So we've decided, as you'll go through the goals and the objectives, you'll see them embedded in the work that we're doing because we do really believe in it and that it's really important to make sure that our kids move forward. What we did want to establish, though, was having clear expectations. What are the expectations for students as we move into a hybrid or remote learning? What are the expectations for staff as we move into that? So how do you develop the vision? How do you move forward with our guiding principles? And then how do you talk through those expectations, which I would imagine is some of the work that would need to take place in August as staff are coming back, understanding what those expectations are, and then how do you begin to prepare the students for a hybrid or remote learning environment. And the other piece that we really wanted to talk about, which I think directly relates back to some of the results that we were getting on the survey, was really that engagement piece. And we know that students can stay engaged if they are receiving that ongoing, meaningful feedback. And that's one way that you can help to keep students more engaged in the learning. So we know that it was really cumbersome at the elementary level because we were really relying on parent emails to communicate with students. So as we move into talking about the technology, you'll see some of the work that we're going to be doing with some of the platforms for K2, which we believe will help to make the students much more independent and be able to communicate those expectations for those students at that age level. And then I think there's also conversations about when do we open up email. So certainly if we continue to use that Google platform, we know that email plays really well with the students because it gives them alerts that their teachers have given them feedbacks on assignments. It allows them to go into their classroom and see what those feedbacks are and then have conversations with their teachers about that. So we know that that's an area that we need to explore further as we move into the hybrid and remote learning. As we move into objective number 2, it's once again focused in on the graduation standards that the students will need, and we're going to continue our work on the vision of the graduate. Certainly as we were getting ready to go out, we had already begun our planning for our meeting with a variety of stakeholders. We had been working behind the scenes, and then that all came to a stop. So we're going to continue all of that work with our vision of our graduate, and we're excited to start engaging in that dialogue and that conversation again. Where you'll see the red, that's a new one. That's an implement a block schedule at New Canaan High School using the 4-period AB schedule. So certainly—
can I speak to that for a quick moment?
Go right ahead.
Just to be sure, just because I don't want to get ahead of anybody. Knowing that the board will be approving these on August 10th, the high school will know where the high school is prior to approving that. But because it's such a significant change, I want it to be articulated in our goals. And I do want the board to know that the high school is talking about this seriously. They've learned quite a bit from the remote learning experience. The question came up before about, what did you learn that you can apply? And that's one of them. But if it seems like a very narrow, specific goal, that's because the high school will have to determine whether or not they're doing this prior to August 10th. And I didn't want to introduce it as something new on August 10th. So we wanted to put it in there now. There we go. And sorry for the curtain on the talk there, but that's why it's so specific there, because if it does happen, there's a lot of professional learning, a lot of work that goes into it, and it needs to be in our district goals if it does happen. And I think that the staff and the administration seem to be supportive of that at this point.
Right. And I think I was just going to say that, as you know, they've spent a lot of time this past year researching it, going out, visiting schools, having conversations about it. I think it was also because of that research and that ability to go out and look at schools that they were able to make that shift in the distance learning. So kudos to them to be able to apply that when they were in that remote learning environment from March to June, to take all that they've learned and say, how can this work and how can we make this better for kids? But Brian's right, they're still in the process of researching it, because there is a lot that needs to go into place in regards to schedule. And so it may be possible to do it for the fall, or it may not. So we're going to need to come back to you on August 10th with more answers in that regard. And if it doesn't get implemented in the fall, then it's probably something that we'll continue to research and provide the professional learning throughout the course of the year. And then certainly in regards to SACS, it's once again looking at the schedule over at SACS, and are there ways for us to make adjustments and have a better understanding of what might be better for our students' health and wellness as well over at SACS. So we're already engaging in that dialogue with the SACS administrators and the staff there. Certainly not talking about going to a block schedule by any means, but just are there better ways for us to service all the students for lunch? As we currently exist, it's 350 students arrive to the cafeteria, 350 students go out for lunch. Is there a different way that we can establish a schedule that allows us to put our students into waves and break that number down so there's not as many students in that cafeteria at one time? That's not in our best interest to be putting all those kids together. So we have to kind of look at all of these different models. Chorus, we know what the research is saying. We can't have 100 kids in a choir room singing. They're not going to be 12 feet apart. So are there different ways that we can look at different scheduling opportunities over at SACS as well? So that's really it for objective number 2. We're going to move into objective number 3, which is really talking about science and technology, engineering, and our STEM initiatives. So obviously we want to continue to develop our STEM programs from K-12, and we're continuing to move forward with the next generation science standards. And real big congratulations to the science department up at the high school for making some great moves between September and March with understanding those next generation science standards and doing the crosswalks with their current courses. We did roll out our grade 9 course on the geophysical science. So now we're at a place where we'll continue to evaluate that course and take a look at the curriculum and make sure it's meeting all of those needs. We've done a lot of research on the biology and where next generation science standards would fit within that biology course. We're now ready to explore chemistry and start talking about the alignment with the next generation science standards there. And we've made some revisions in our biology units, and now we're at a place where we want to begin that implementation of those units of study. And really that focus is more on those practice standards, those engineering practice standards that we really want to spend. And that's really where that best practices comes in. So it's really about how do you ask and define those problems? How do you construct explanations and design solutions? So it's all those engineering practice standards. So it's not necessarily, here's the NGSS standard and I must teach this NGS standard. It's all about the practices that go within that classrooms and the types of assessments and how they use phenomenons to engage in argument and from evidence and that science discourse. So that's more of what we'll be looking at within that biology as we're continuing to explore revisions in chemistry. And then we'll move into objective 4, which is about our health curriculum. And really the only adjustments there is you'll see K and 1 being implemented this year. So we've had to make some adjustments because what first graders and second graders were learning last year was similar. And now first graders will need to have a different set of curriculum that they'll be learning as they move forward, and we'll be ready to introduce that in kindergarten as well. And certainly we're going to be exploring that health schedule as we move into just how the schools will need to be set up and physical education and what does that mean when we can't get kids outside. Is there a possibility that part of those rainy days where they're inside a classroom might be the delivery of those health lessons? So we're trying to work through all of that with the PE teachers and Jonathan. And then we're going to continue to work with grade 9, where the health program has really helped to support all of that emotional intelligence work. It's also diving into the coping strategies, the anxiety, all of that piece really hits hard in that 9th grade health curriculum. And so it's continue to work through those pieces as we move forward. And then as we move into objective number 5 about the technology, knowledge, and skills, really you're going to just see some adjustments in the language. It's really supporting those teachers and helping them to understand the synchronous and asynchronous online instruction that they can be delivering to students. So we've given a lot of professional development in the tools. So how do you use Screencastify? How do you use Flipgrid? And now it's really helping them to determine when do they make those decisions. When do you actually engage in a lesson that's more asynchronous? And when do you really need to go synchronous, which is the live instruction with your kids? And it's trying to help them to look at the type of lesson that they need to deliver and then making those decisions about, is this really going to be an asynchronous kind of instruction and a type of lesson that needs to go on? Or is it something that I really need my kids live for a period of the time of the class? So it's really exploring all of that. The next real adjustment is really talking about the learning management system for students and really making sure that there's consistency and equity across the 9-12. So when we went out in March, we gave teachers a little bit of a choice that, if the teachers were really feeling comfortable and ready to move forward with Schoology, they flipped all of their classes right into Schoology, ran all of their courses. There were some teachers that had one course designed over in Schoology but hadn't rolled all their other courses over into Schoology. And so there were a few that were still using Google Classroom. So our goal for next year is that all 9-12 teachers will be using Schoology as the learning management system, and we'll be training the 9th graders when they come on board on how to utilize Schoology. We do, going back to one of the comments that was made, what kinds of things can we do for students before they come back to school. We do have some virtual classes that kids can take on Schoology, so they kind of have some boot camps that they could get themselves acclimated with Schoology and get themselves enrolled. So we do have some opportunity for kids to start playing around with some of these tools before they even come back in August. And then obviously we kind of had to put a stop on the learning management system and rolling that into 5.8. So we were too afraid that if we had to go to hybrid or remote learning, it would be too challenging for the teachers to learn Schoology and roll it out with their kids all at the same time. So as you recall, the high school staff really had about 1.5 years to learn this. We started with a group last spring who piloted, and then we did a lot of training of staff throughout the spring before they even went home during the summer. And then during the summer, there were some high school teachers that started to develop their courses and started to really play around with Schoology. And then we really spent a couple professional learning days in August and then again in November. So you think of all that professional learning it took for our high school staff to really acclimate themselves to Schoology before they rolled it out with their students. It would just be too challenging to do that with 5.8. So we're really going to continue 5.8 with Google Classroom as we move in. Once again, really training kids how to use email so that they can look for feedback from their teachers and check assignments. There's some other features in Google that we can open up as well for parents. So we're really going to hit hard with that, but we don't want to lose sight of that learning management system. I think it was a big budget item that we talked about, was moving the middle school into an LMS, and maybe even talking about an elementary school in an LMS. So it is something that we want to keep in our district goals, continue to explore, continue to have conversations about, and obviously continue to talk about it from a budget perspective as well. And then the next platform that we were talking about earlier that I had mentioned was really about that K2 platform. So we know that that was an age group that really struggled as we moved into remote learning, and were really reliant on their parents. So the teachers were sending emails to the parents had to read the emails, the parents were really the ones clicking on the links and opening things. So it really took a tremendous amount of effort from all of our parents to move this forward. So we really want to have our students be more independent. And so we do believe that there's a platform called Seesaw that we've investigated, and the TIs have really spent a lot of time looking at this and are beginning to train staff on it. We had a couple teachers in the spring pilot it. We had some special ed staff pilot it, but we do believe it's going to be a great way for the work to be organized, for the teacher to communicate what the expectations are, to provide feedback to the students, and really help the students to be much more independent. But once again, it's that all that professional learning in August. So not only do you train the teachers, but then how do the teachers train the kids how to utilize Seesaw when they come back so that they're prepared? So that if something happens, they're the ones. Your parents aren't going to know what Seesaw is. They're not going to know how to utilize Seesaw. They're going to need to know from the kids how to utilize Seesaw. So it's how do we teach the kids how to do that? And then as we move into objective number 6, you'll see that we're going to continue to work with RTI. And really the only adjustment to that objective is really that whole supporting that vulnerable population that we were talking about earlier. So it was so nice to have Lizette here this evening, because that is one of the vulnerable populations that as we return in the fall, we really need to look at the educational environment, regardless of whether we're in person, hybrid, or remote. It's once again talking about students that are coming back with anxiety, students that are feeling socially isolated. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this area. So we wanted to make sure that it was part of our district goals in moving forward. Objective number 7 is really dealing with world language. So we really didn't make too many adjustments here. We didn't give our 8th graders the assessment, so we'll continue to do that. Obviously, we want to encourage people to, our students to graduate with the seal of biliteracy. We feel very strongly about the seal of biliteracy. I think one of the areas that we added in that you'll see is really dealing with the state requirements. So now that they require world language, you need to have a credit in world language. So we are expanding some of our opportunities and pathways in world language to help some kids get that state requirement. So perhaps offering a Greek mythology class for kids that may not normally engage in the language, so that they have an opportunity to engage in that language and receive the credit that they might need for state graduation requirements. VPA, we've made some progress with revising our curriculum, but we're going to need to continue to work on that. I know that Alan came, I think, last fall and gave you a nice presentation, and that's certainly one of the goals that we'll continue to focus in on. 9, we're going to continue to monitor the downtown campus. I'm imagining probably a year from now that will probably just come off as one of our district goals, but we didn't want to lose sight of it. And we do consider that one of our vulnerable populations as well, as we're sitting there watching as kids are returning. For some of these kids, it's a real struggle for them to come back to school. They were happy in remote learning because they have a school phobia. So we're going to have to work with them to get them back in to our downtown campus. So we'll continue to provide those opportunities and monitor student progress. I think, Brian, you want to take goal number 2, or I can answer questions on goal number 1 if that's an easier way to go about it.
Whatever the board prefers.
Yeah, why don't we ask questions on this one?
Sure.
So an obvious one was that the start times was deleted from the agenda. So I think that's one worthwhile talking about.
Sure, I can start, and everyone's welcome. Oh, am I muted?
Nope.
Can you hear me okay?
No.
No? Okay,
Yep,
good. Sorry. I didn't see myself there. Okay. So we were looking at everything going on this year and recognizing that it's not a non-traditional year as we come in with start times and school durations and number of days and all of that. And then, to be fair, made an evaluation about district bandwidth a little bit. You know, all of what it takes to prepare and to get the schools open and to monitor that regularly and to be nimble and flexible and be able to adjust to what those demands are. We thought that this is where we begin the conversation with the board, and we're certainly open to, you know, to the conversation, but, you know, there's a lot on our plate. You know, the challenges with the pandemic, of course, it touches every aspect of our operations. As Jill mentioned before, and I think it's well said, good practice is good practice regardless of the venue of teaching. So that's where in goal 1, sort of COVID was, the needs here are interwoven, but we thought that we'd at least start here for the board's conversation and see where the discussion led. Brenda, go ahead.
Yeah, I just I had the same question, and I just wonder, we can talk about it when we next go through these, but I just wonder if we should have something that, it's not quite as broad as health and wellness, but to talk about, I mean, you're talking about block scheduling at high school. Do we evaluate as things, hopefully over time, hopefully this year, get back to normal, I hope. Do we evaluate our, start times and scheduling more on a, broader basis? For example, I mean, I don't, who knows what, we have in our future, but, there could be things that come out of distance learning that are helpful for kids that we, choose to implement more broadly that we just don't even know about right now that could just make sense going forward. So I kind of think about this as, it's hard to pinpoint it. It's certainly not implementing a start time change for this coming year. But I would certainly want to keep on here the consideration of, changes to the school schedule, meaning start and end times, as well as the day beyond just a block schedule at the high school and looking at SAC scheduling to make sure that, it's top of mind, acknowledging that this is a year where, you have limited bandwidth, so you're not going to necessarily be able to pull that off. I don't know if all that makes sense, but that's how I'm thinking about it.
It does, and as many of you know, in the distance learning that we just experienced, we did have our high school students starting later, right, for their classes and their schedule. And full disclosure, we were working on a schedule that could have perhaps had our high school kids coming in later, where they were taking a block at home in the morning and then coming in after that. But we've been working with the State Department. As of just this afternoon, feedback is that the 180 days and the 900 hours are not going to be waived. So those solutions, you just can't, you have to, you know, if you have to do 900 hours in the school building in order to earn credit, then it's got to happen. You know, we've got to use our system the way that we have it today, you know, with the 3 tiers and what have you. So we did learn, I think, that students and families appreciated starting a little bit later, you know, during the distance learning. It's, again, the challenge right now is everything's on the table. So,
yeah, but I guess I would, I don't know, I would encourage us to have a flexible approach to this, meaning if we find that we're sort of, you know, in a groove as we get into this new school year, which is kind of hard to imagine right now, but that we, you know, keep this as a focus. And so I would hate to take it off here and then say, okay, like we'll reevaluate it next school year or next summer. I'd kind of like to keep it on here and say, you know, qualify it in some way to say to the extent possible, given, you know, COVID dynamics or whatever, you know, something along those lines.
Yeah, so to pick up on a couple things. Well, first of all, like what Brendan said earlier, this is an incredibly complex undertaking in terms of planning out this coming school year, you know, including all the permutations of it may be live, it may be completely online, the hybrid. Yeah, it ramps up the complexity tremendously. And so to the administration and all the people on the Reopen Schools Committee, you know, thank you for that work and totally appreciate it. I do think that, you know, it seems like there were some other instances where things are going to be kind of backburnered, but they were left in the statement of goals and objectives. And I think in that spirit, this would be an important one to keep flagged and acknowledged as a important issue for the community. Obviously, there was, you know, a very large grassroots, you know, organic movement to bring this up, and they were, you know, really quite disappointed this year based on what happened. You know, we'd made great progress on it, and based on what happened with the budget, and to have, you know, the double whammy, I think is really disheartening to those people that made a good faith effort to advance this cause. So I really would be opposed to removing it from the district objectives, even if we do acknowledge that, you know, just in triage mode, it's going to have to take a back burner for some time. And finally, you know, we do have our committees going, resource committee, et cetera, and people on the board, you know, can continue to, at the committee level, be doing some legwork to try to answer some of the thorny questions that you know, were raised as we went through that process. And, you know, we did raise a lot of questions and really increase our understanding, and to just drop it and potentially lose all that, you know, knowledge, forget it, would be a shame, you know, and have to go back and revisit it kind of from scratch. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts on that.
Wonder, just, you know, and I know others have comments and I would like to hear it, but I'm wondering if we sort of reframe the goal as a more goal 4 objective around health and wellness, because I think at the end of the day, the objective is sleep for our students. And, you know, while we can probably acknowledge that won't happen from, you know, fundamentally changing bus times and logistics, we don't have the budget and perhaps the bandwidth to make that happen. Perhaps we can just keep a focus on how through the different phases and scenarios that we implement distance learning and hybrid, that, you know, we kind of maintain our focus on health and wellness and achieving, you know, the most possible sleep for our students. So anyways,
well, how do we just have a statement of reality, given that, given the other priorities and the fact that the whole bus schedule is going to be completely upended by this new approach, that, you know, the realities we're not going to get to this year, but we acknowledge that it's an important item on the agenda and want to keep it on there to revisit, you know, either later this school year or, you know, this time next year. I just don't want to send the message that it's just being completely stricken off the agenda, pushed aside by circumstance after, you know, a lot of years of effort. I don't think that sends a great message. I don't think it's the right thing.
Sherry, and then Penny.
Yeah, so I agree with what's already been stated. I also would like to see it remain in the goals. I completely appreciate the reality of the bandwidth constraints, but I do, and I like Katrina's suggestion of framing it in a health and wellness goal. I think that we put forward a science-based recommendation for later start times, and I don't think that we should close the door on that. I think, you know, putting it in a health and wellness goal, recognizing the bandwidth constraints, but getting into it if we can, possibly in 2021. I think, you know, to leave that as an opportunity, I would encourage us to do so.
Penny.
So I also think we need to have something substantial in the goals about the school start time options, because what we've said as a board is that we've deferred this item. We haven't said that we're not going to go forward with it. So whether it's in health and wellness or whatever, I think some sort of a statement, you know, that we support changing the school start times. We support this tier that we had, you know, in the reality, if you want to have something about realities and how much we can do this year, I think that's, you know, to qualify it, you know, maybe that is where we need to be. But if once something drops out of the goals, a lot of times it's hard to get it back into the goals. And I think that this is an issue that we've deferred, we haven't abandoned as a board. And so I think that's what our goals should represent.
Deanna?
So I agree that, you know, with your suggestion, Katrina, to maybe focus on health and wellness. I worry about being overly specific in this year, because we do what's in here, the community will read, and Dr. Lutzy and the staff will be held accountable to, not only by us, but by the community. And what I worry about is that there would be an anticipation, as there was the last time we put it in the goal, that there would be action on that goal item in that year. And I don't care how soft you make the language, people will see that and start to motivate around it, which, you know, is great. But this is, right now, we really need to focus on getting our schools open safely and transitioning, if we need to, into more remote learning in a more robust way. So I think whatever we put in there has to be very carefully worded, because it will be taken by the community and be a pressure point for the administration and the board. And then I had a question on goal 1, objective 2, item C, the implement a block schedule at New Canaan High School using a 4-period AB schedule. Is that just for COVID? Because I don't know, as a board member, I don't know that I feel like I am prepared to say post-COVID that, you know, it's still a pretty controversial item in the community and among the staff. And I don't feel like I'm there. And I don't know that we've, you know, really dug into that enough as a board to say that's a permanent change. So if we're going to use that.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to suggest that if this was just a COVID related goal, then I'm fine with it. I might have serious reservations if it was considered a permanent adjustment to the high school schedule.
So the quick response to that is as Jill mentioned, they had been doing some visits, going out to other schools, go do it. And really COVID is accelerating the timeline in which to make the decision. They were planning to spend another year doing some more research and developing different models, and bringing in some training and doing other things prior to making a decision. In the experience we just had, it's significantly COVID related in that they realized the high school schedule doesn't translate well to a remote environment at all. For lots of reasons. So when they switched to a block, it changed the experience in a good way for the kids, for the teachers. And so one of the challenges that we continue to bring forward to our principals and others is, what system can you put in place now that's flexible enough to be successful in an all-in or an all-out or somewhere in between model? And that's this. So that's really what's driving the decision now versus doing a little more. For what it's worth, I believe just about every high school in our DERG is doing something similar, looking at doing the same thing. Wilton went to a block a year ago or so, but all the others are looking to open in a similar way because for that reason. So it has the flexibility to work regardless of the modality of teaching.
So it still goes back, so what you're telling me is this would be a permanent change, even post-COVID.
No, I'm saying that COVID is accelerating the need to make a decision. And then we can evaluate that decision again, when, we get the green light all clear and we can go back to the way things were. I think that at that point we'll have more conversations to work through, what that schedule is going to be. I will share the staff did participate in a meeting with the administration last week where they were given there was lots of conversation about this idea. Hold on, I'm sorry.
If anyone thought our school system was not energy efficient, Brian's office is.
I think all the energy's in my office because my light's not going off.
The problem is I'm being too energy efficient and not moving enough. My steps are way down tonight, but the staff has an opportunity to provide feedback. There's opportunities and challenges, and they've been working through those together. I do believe the staff recognizes that this is an important shift to make given the environment that we're in. I'm not committing to this being permanent or not. I don't think we're there. I think we need to live in this space.
I would just want to change the language on this then, because I think the way it's worded, at least as I read it, made it sound like that's a permanent change and I'm guessing anyone that read our goals would see that as a permanent change to the high school scheduling. And I think you're going to get yourself in. There'll be a lot of feedback on that. I know from parents because I've seen it online already.
Sure.
And I have gotten, during the start times, I got a lot of feedback from teachers on the block scheduling. So I want
in a
to stay
traditional.
careful.
Gotcha. I agree. And in a traditional environment without what we're doing here, we would spend a year with outreach and learning and thinking and what have you. So we don't have that luxury. So the language could change. The language could change to be about implementing a schedule that's flexible and works in all modalities, i.e. block schedule, without being quite so specific for that purpose of being able to flip, and so we can work something through there.
Yeah, because being flexible now and flexible later are different things. Hopefully this will not be a standard that we're having to plan for, all the time, moving into a remote learning situation. So
high school administration may come back and say, look, we've really thought it through and we don't think that's the right solution, in which case we'll strike it entirely.
This is your August 10th meeting?
Your August 10th meeting, our August 10th meeting. Right, okay. Right. So before the goals are approved as a second reading, we'll know a lot more. I just didn't want it to be a surprise between now and then. Right. So we put it on, but we can work the language.
Yeah, because I wouldn't even be comfortable by August 10th making a decision on a permanent block scheduling post-COVID.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, okay. And then this is just a question, and maybe for Jill or somebody on objective 3, goal 1, objective 3, item D. So we have review biology and chemistry curriculum, but then you have begin implementation of a revised biology unit. So I thought you were done with the review of the biology and now you're implementing, but I was confused by that language.
Right. So we're not done with all of the biology units.
Okay.
So last year, a big focus was on the grade 9 and getting the geophysical science up. And then it was trying to figure out what standards are sitting within the geophysical science and what need to go into the biology and what need to go to the chemistry. We're in a unique situation because some school districts have shifted where grade 9 is completely geophysical science, and that's not our grade 9 options. So we still offer biology in grade 9, and we offer honors biology in grade 9. So some of the next generation science standards that are addressed in the geophysical science, we've now got to figure out that pathway for the kids who start in with the biology.
Okay.
Am I making sense in that regard? So yeah, so what we've got is we've got the geophysical science pathway that moves into the biology. So if you're a freshman and you've started with geophysical science, and then as a sophomore you take biology, we're in a good place there. Now we've got to start merging in, where do we go with the kids who are starting with the biology, who miss the geophysical science and the next generation science standards that are there, because there's a tremendous amount of them that are in physical science. And so we've got to figure out how to merge them in to the biology and even in some of the chemistry before they have to move forward with the next generation science assessment as a junior.
Okay. All right.
So
Thank you.
we're ready to start rolling forward some of the units of study. We're not ready to roll all of them forward, but that was also why we really wanted to emphasize those standards and what are those practice standards that we really want to begin to focus on, moving some phenomenons and science discourse and really having the students take the leadership of being some of the problem solvers in those classrooms.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry if that wasn't clear, and I can work on the wording if it's still unclear.
Well, you made it clear now, so thank you.
Eddie, go ahead.
So I just want to say that in terms of dealing with the situation we're in now and COVID, I thought it was terrific that we were looking at the block schedule for this coming year, because it struck me that it did go very well combining with distance learning if we have to do it, and the learning in school, and as well if we're trying to cohort the students as we're supposed to do under the guidelines, using a block schedule seemed to me to be give us greater ability to do that. Maybe even we wouldn't want to have an AB, maybe we would want to have an AABB schedule. I don't know. I know that the high school is the most difficult school to try and cohort students together. So obviously you all have to decide whether or not that's a possibility, but I saw that as sort of a good way for us to deal with some of the stresses that we're under with the pandemic.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely right. And that does factor into the thinking. Even the number of transitions in hallways, you cut those down by half. You can be more creative with the lunches and do something different with the lunches during the blocks. Yeah, and when students have free periods, they can go off campus. So you're reducing the number of kids in the building during those times as well. So it does give you, on the safety side through that lens, there are opportunities there that you don't have in our current schedule. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a suggestion, just generally speaking. There are a number of current situation COVID specific priorities put into the list here, and then there's others that are long-term change oriented. I would maybe call out the ones that are the short-term COVID related, just clarify what those are, and then we can avoid some of the confusion that Deanna spoke about. Understanding that some of those ones that we now think of short-term, maybe they become long-term, but we can revisit that at the time.
Yeah, you'll see that in some of the other goals, right? As we get it, like 2 is literally the first one in communications is around developing the COVID communication strategy.
Yeah, so I noticed that. So I think, why don't we do that consistently, that that, call out the ones that are, very specific to the current situation.
There can be an opportunity to do that. There won't be as many of them necessarily in goal 1, because as we mentioned before, good practice is good practice, right? So we do want to be sure that there's that transference over this idea that, best practice in teaching in a blended learning environment is going to stay consistent 5, 10, 15 years from now, as we continue to grow. So there could be some, but we also don't want to limit, because we may wind up, again, just to the block schedule. We may go to that and find that it is successful in the high school. It is working well. So we don't want to feel like we have to redo or take a step backwards. So we do want to keep learning from the experience going forward. But if there are some that kind of sunset when we're out of the pandemic and the environment we're in, we can work to identify those. Sure.
And I think part of when we were talking about goal number 1 as well, we really go back into our whole teaching and effective teaching framework that we utilize. And I think as we move into goal 3 and we talk about that whole effective teaching framework, we really have a robust effective teaching framework. And when you start to read through that, so much of that is applicable to what needs to happen in instruction and assessment with our students. So, we certainly can do that, but I think it is part of what we all do on a day-to-day basis, and we just don't want to lose sight of that. So the technology is all embedded within our effective teaching framework. The social emotional learning is all embedded within our effective teaching framework. Feedback, high expectations for our kids, it's all part of that. But now it's trying to train our teachers, how do you do it in all these different kinds of learning environments? How do you do it when you're in person? How do you do it when you're in hybrid? How do you do it when you're in remote? And so that's just part of what we need to kind of explore with our teachers and help them to see that they can do this. They're very talented, and we can work through all of that professional learning. Now that they've had that experience from March to June, I do think that they're going to have those opportunities to do flipped classrooms more and blended learning approaches. We've had conversations about online learning for years now. Now we're actually living online learning, and we're actually going through and moving forward with it. It's a whole new way of approaching some of our courses for the future, maybe.
Gianna?
I was just going to say, I like Carl's suggestion. We used to have a 5th goal in our district goals around, and it was related to some financial things during a time when things were sort of complicated, and we've subsequently removed that. And so I don't think we necessarily.
No, we still have goal 5, Deanna.
Where's the financial goal? I don't see it.
The stewardship goal. Yep, goal 5.
I missed it. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, well, we could add a 6 then.
Okay.
A temporary 6, that sort of really address. This is an unprecedented time, and I would hate for us to, I just don't want. It is confusing when there's some things in here that are really focused on what we're doing related to, and I appreciate that some things could be long term, but they haven't really been fleshed out as a board, and so. And I think they need to be fleshed out as a board before they become entrenched in the district, but that they need to be implemented this year because of what's going on. And so I would like to see some distinction between what we're doing related to the pandemic and what is really truly a long-term district goal.
So,
Brandon.
Yeah, I actually, so just hearing everything, I think we should, I like the approach that we've taken here with a few modifications to call out things that are specifically in response to COVID. But I think if we, put in a new goal specific to COVID, I think we might lose some of the things that we may learn from these challenges, that are specific to the broader goals that we have. So, for example, we're going to learn things from going to a block schedule. We're going to learn things from implementing some of the technology initiatives. Like we learned tonight that there are things that we're learning in in foreign languages that we can implement when we go back, full time in the classroom. So I think we should identify things that we're doing specific to addressing COVID. But I think if we say, oh, those are COVID related things, we're through COVID, let's now go back to the goals that we had before, I think we might lose some of the things that we're learning as a result of these challenges.
No, that's why I said that clearly some of these ones that are situation specific will end up having long-term impacts. Obviously, COVID's accelerating a lot of long simmering trends, and that's going to be true here. And so actually that would be a very good goal specifically to say, let's be mindful of what we learned from some of the temporary things that we thought were temporary in terms of, vetting them for longer term implementation, incorporation into how we do things.
Right. Yeah. The other thing
I just think, for example, if you put something in here that's very related to what we're doing now in terms of helping students organize their work for online learning and providing feedback, which are all absolutely need to happen in this current environment, including based on from the survey. But then that automatically opens the door to that we're going to have distance learning, from now until forever. That should be a very conscious decision that's made, and not one that just kind of we started to do it for a very specific situation and then it just kind of floated on.
I do just want to share one quick thought. And I've said this in years past, one of the things I truly value about the way that we do this with our goals and objectives is that we do it annually. We don't create a 3 or a 5 year plan. We don't try to pretend we know what's going to happen 5 years from now. So it's an annual process. So we really are looking at, what do we need to do this year? Next year, around this time, we're going to be back at it and looking at the goals, and, they've been flexible, so that's where I do think the structure we have works well to be responsive to the environment that we're in. The 5 overarching goals do sort of hit all the aspects of our operations and our work. So, the teaching and learning, communication, all those 5 big things. So they do work to be sure that we're hitting on those areas that are important. But we could come back together a year from now, be in a very different context, and be talking about a whole different host of, objectives and indicators. And that's perfectly fine, because that's the way our process works. And I tell people often that, it's fun to create a 5-year plan, but it's helpful to do it a year at a time. And that's one of the reasons we do it that way. So just for what it's worth, it's a nimble enough document to be reflective of what we need when we discuss it and make the decisions.
Right. And some of the things I would want to keep blended in. I mean, we learned so much about technology, and the question that I posed to all of the staff and the curriculum leaders before they went out was, so if you had to come back and be in person, what types of software would you want to continue with and would not be able to survive without? And it was amazing what they were coming up with. And then we were saying, what softwares did you put in to have in the budget for this upcoming year that you'd want to remove now? And they were like, oh, I don't need that anymore. I mean, Melinda came up with such creative things that she was like, no, I no longer need these 3 pieces of software, but I need this. So it is that they really have pushed themselves to new learning and new ways of thinking and new ways of delivering with their students. So we did learn a lot during that time period. And I think some of you have said that already, that we don't want to lose sight of improving what we're capable of doing with our kids as well. So some of it I would want to say, let's keep it embedded, because I do imagine that Screencastify and Flipgrid and some of the other softwares that are really, Seesaw is not something that we would just do away with after distance learning. It would be something that we would continue to use as a platform for our K-2 kids. So it's probably trying to balance out, if we do want to separate it out, what are things that we probably would want to keep in with our regular goals, because it is part of a new practice that our teachers have developed, and it's good for kids and good for how they learn.
Yeah, I mean, I like how the the COVID catalysted items are embedded in the relevant area of the priorities. So I don't like the idea of just creating a COVID category. I think it's good to have it here. I'm just mindful of to have it weaved throughout the plan where it's relevant.
Right.
And I'm just mindful of making permanent changes based on transient conditions, as a matter of policy versus revisiting them on their merits based on the learnings from how they're implemented during this period.
Yep.
It may make sense too as we go through other goals just to see as we reference COVID specific or non-specific goals, perhaps by the end we come up with the sort of best approach. So are there any other comments or questions on this particular goal 1?
Okay, so COVID specific goal, here you go. Goal 2, right here in communication. And it really is, again, it's number 1, it's front and center, and it's what I spelled out just before when talking about, our process, but it doesn't end there, of course. I mean, we've created a website that will go live tomorrow, and I'll be sending an email blast out and a phone communication as well. That will be the repository of updates and information for anybody, so that the information is available when people want to go find it, instead of feeling like they have to wait for a blast and for us to have to sort of actively do that, especially given that, it's July 13th. A lot of people are on vacation and different places, maybe away from their phones or what have you. So we'll get that website published tomorrow. That timeline that I went through before about communications, and then of course it will continue right into the new school year. And I anticipate that our principals and others will continue to apply what they've learned about effective communication, regardless of the modality of teaching when we return. So for communication, I think that's responsive, clear, timely, and inclusive. And we usually talk a lot more about goal 1 than the other goals.
Right.
We just did.
And then certainly as we move into goal number 3, you are going to see something that is more relative to COVID. But I do think it's really important, because I think, as I was saying before, our effective teaching framework is incredibly robust. And as I spent time looking at it this summer and really reading through it, it really is applicable for multiple learning environments that our students engage in. One of the challenges is, though, how do you supervise and evaluate staff? And we need to really think about how do we train our staff to be able to move forward with that supervision and evaluation, whether they're in a hybrid or in distance learning. So they're really talented. They know how to do it when we're in person. And it's easy. You just walk into those classrooms, you sit down, you observe, you have conversations with kids, you watch the instruction, you're reading through their assessments, you're meeting with them. It really shifts as you move into hybrid and distance learning. What we do know from the State Department of Ed is that they probably are going to keep that whole supervision and evaluation process in place. They have no, right now they're not predicting that they're going to remove it. So they did put it on hold. When we went out on COVID from March to June, they said all teacher evaluation was put on hold, but we're not getting any indication that that's going to happen for the upcoming school year. So as Brian indicated, as strong as they are about their 900 hours, 180 school days, they're also feeling very strong about teacher evaluation and supervision. So I do think that we need to work through some professional learning opportunities for our administrators, and what does that mean, and what does that look like, and how do you sit in a, get invited to the Zooms and get invited to their Schoologies and their Google Classrooms to really immerse yourself in what's happening in all of these environments.
Okay. Good. So goal 4, as was mentioned earlier, about the importance of this work and thoughtfulness of this work. So objective 1 is around our school culture and climate. and the work that we've been doing with Ruler. I mentioned before also that the Dalio Foundation is underwriting training for staff over the summer across the state, which is wonderful. So we're going to continue our implementation of EI, K-12, and again, being responsive to the current SEL needs of students during the coronavirus pandemic. The revising the curriculum, again, to include the application of EI skills, focus on coping strategies. This good work, a lot of it will be continuing. You know, we've been doing work with Ruler across the district for the last 3+ years. So we'll continue to do that. But under, say, 1F, you see that goes specifically to some of what we talked about earlier, developing clear plans and protocols to provide increased support to students and their families who've struggled academically and or emotionally in the remote learning environment. As I mentioned before, now we have a much clearer sense of who they are, and we want to make sure that we continue to identify, you know, who they may be. The parent education opportunities on EI at all levels, and again, including support with distance learning in the event it's necessary. So, you know, again, the emotional needs are very different depending upon where we are, and remote learning is a piece of it. But of course, if we're in hybrid or full remote learning, that's because the intensity of the pandemic has increased, right? So that's a part of the anxiety and the stress around this. It's not simply because they're at home learning, it's also because of what's going on that's making that a necessity for our kids and families. So making sure we provide that support there. So the ongoing work with Ruler and our social emotional efforts that we've had across the district. Now, objective 2 is a new objective based on conversations, email, what have you. And the objective there is to identify and implement ways to expand and increase educational equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout the district. And to begin that work, we thought we'd start with the Board of Education and the administrative team working together and using a collaborative process to develop, approve, and publish a district-wide statement on equity, diversity, and inclusion. That we'd continue to provide professional development for faculty and staff focused on increasing awareness of issues of equity, improving cultural humility, and increasing culturally proficient and responsive educational practices. We're continuing that work because we began that work this year very specifically, and in years past as well, even with our administrative retreat right up through professional learning that occurred in February with some staff members. To develop and provide educational opportunities to high school students to increase sensitivity towards issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, and to prepare them as global citizens. To develop and provide parent education on these same issues of equity, diversity, inclusion. To continue our work at the elementary and middle school levels to provide students with culturally diverse learning experiences and to expand culturally responsive literature. Present an update on the social studies curriculum and identify additional opportunities in other content areas to increase content on diversity and inclusion K-12, and to identify and share system-wide efforts regarding equity, diversity, inclusion, such as in our human resources department, special education, what have you. As you can imagine, these issues exist in curricular goals, but also throughout our system. So to identify some current practices and to continue looking for ways to improve in all facets of our system, you know, in the operational side and the curricular side and others. So I think that's that one. Okay. And should I just touch 3 very quickly and then we'll do the whole goal as we have the others, Sharon? Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
This one's quick and easy. Continue to analyze and update safety and security plans and practices. That one's simply to update our security and safety protocols so they're in alignment with our adjusted practices due to COVID, such as, you know, outdoor classrooms and things like that. So as we look to, you know, we're going from buildings locked down to trying to capitalize on outdoor spaces. And so we've got to look at our safety protocols through crisis advisory board, what have you. So let me scroll back up and open it up. Sure.
So it's late, so I'm going to be brief. But I just want to say that I strongly support the addition of the new language around equity, diversity, and inclusion. I think it's crucial that at this moment in history that we as a board, as educational leaders, and that our district, that we communicate the importance of these values and really truly that they are at the cornerstone of what we do, our values and our belief system and our actions. I especially like the addition of the professional development and the parent education. One thing I would like added is I believe in order for us to execute on these goals, we are going to need budget dollars to bring in an expert consultant. I don't think that this is work that we can do alone. I think many districts have already or are hiring DEI leaders for their districts. I don't see that happening for us this year, but at the very least, I would like to see an expression that we are going to bring expert resources to bear to make sure that we do this right. But I do, again, strongly support this, and thank you for all of the language that you've vetted here.
Right.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as Sherry. And just to be brief, I think I agree with the comment around, hiring some experts to help us. In particular, I think, probably thinking through how we may sort of get improved diversity in our faculty and staff over time. It's, I think that's something that's, can be challenging. And I would just want to know, what's the best way to think about that and try to make that happen. So I think getting some, outside advice on something like that might be helpful.
Thanks. Deanna?
This is Carl.
No, it's Carl, sorry.
Hold on, Carl. I'll come right back to you next.
Okay.
So I appreciate the, desire for bringing in an outside resource to help with this kind of work, and I appreciate the need for it. But these goals, as Dr. Lutze has articulated earlier, are for this coming year, and with as I've said earlier, a $550,000 budget cut year over year, I don't see dollars going towards an outside consultant or expertise. I would be disappointed in losing, staffing in the classroom because we have a very tight budget this year. So I appreciate the need for it, but I don't think in this year an outside consultant is something that we can afford in this budget cycle. But I appreciate the need. Sure, I appreciate the articulation, but you yourself articulated that we don't really have the resources this year. And because these are this year's goals, I'm not sure I would want to add that into this year's goal.
I do want to just mention that some of the low-level things that we can do in regards to professional development, though, because we did bring in outside people last year to begin our professional development in February, and we did include some of those low-level things. So they're not, it's not big ticket items like bringing in a huge consultant that's going to explore everything, but there are people that we can bring in that can offer professional development to our staff, that can also, work with our administrators and certainly provide some educational opportunities. So there are some opportunities that are more low-level, but it is there as part of some of the consulting, because we were talking about it at our administrative retreat last year, and we did build in some money for staff development as we were moving in and thinking about what we wanted to map out in February. We did have Mara Gottlieb come in and speak with all of the SAC staff. We had Chris Lehman come in and do a whole workshop with our elementary and looking at literature books that they're reading with their students within the classroom. So we do have that has kind of been built in, and we wanted to continue that work from February to June. Obviously that kind of stopped and halted the work that we had started already. So we do have some low-level money that's been built in for some of that professional development too.
So this Carl.
I said Carl next, go ahead.
So I had the great benefit of going to a public high school that was very racially diverse. It was just the nature of our community. And it's been one of the great benefits of my life. And actually, I've told you, my mom was the head of the Board of Ed when I was growing up, and our superintendent, Dr. Warner, was an African-American who was absolutely brilliant. And I still, regard him as a mentor and hold him in the highest regard. And I think this is just an incredibly important issue for our country, and our country will never realize its promises and its goals until we hit this head on. I actually get a little emotional about this. But I have concern that, you know, we've been talking about a total, you know, lack of bandwidth, given that we're going to have to completely change the school model this year. And to try to, this needs to be so thoughtfully done and so deeply and well thought out. And there's so many nuances to this and ways that it could blow back and end up being counterproductive. And to try to make this a headline goal in this year, I think is incredibly imprudent. We could start to do some study just, you know, on the committee level. That's doable, and to start setting up a process for how to think about this and get feedback from, most importantly, the students about how they think about this and what they need, and to try to, this is a very comprehensive plan here, and I think it's too ambitious for, you know, where we are today and what we need to find out.
So, I mean, a quick response for what it's worth. As we put this together, much of this is about learning, right? So if you take a look, we are continuing what's been started. So certainly a district-wide statement of equity, diversity, and inclusion is a new product, right? It's something that the board, the administrative team would be working together. But if you continue down, you see we continue to provide the professional development for faculty and staff, which is, we've begun doing that work already. So it's a logical next step for us, which we need to do. We wouldn't just stop, right? We continue. Providing the educational opportunities to our high school students is something we've been working on. There's a statute around courses and requiring courses to be offered at the high school that meet this sort of objective a bit for us. Parent education, something that's a little bit new, but Susan Bliss has been really thinking deeply about this for a little while and has some ideas around directionality there. Continuing our work at the elementary and middle school. Now that may look different. We're not bringing speakers in, where it's a different experience, but I know our PTCs want to continue partnering with us in that work. The social studies curriculum, we think it's a place to begin. It's certainly not all by a long shot, but it's a place to begin the conversation around curricular entry points and understanding what we're currently doing so we can then plan forward. And the same goes with G, you know, so we can identify, like, so question just quickly, Brendan asked around diversity in the workplace. We've been doing some work around there. We can share with you what we've been doing. And then also we can think about what can we do more in the future around access to the program through a special ed program. We do an enormous amount already. We can share some of that. What other steps? What else is there? And there's other opportunities. So it is about, we tried to frame it as a learning year with some logical next steps and directions that we've already have some momentum. And I don't know if that helps to kind of put it there. I agree that it's ambitious given the challenges before us, certainly. But I also agree that it's essential work. And, you know, if the board agrees, we're committed to doing it. Yep, Julie?
Yeah, I think, you know, I've sort of was weighing what Carl was saying, and you know, you all know better than we everything that's on your plate, and obviously we have to be so mindful of the bandwidth of teachers and administrators and whatever. But I agree that I think this is an issue that, like, the time is now that we need to be continuing to address it. And I'm glad to know, you know, I think to the end of communication, I think lots of folks aren't aware of the work that's already being done, myself included. So I think that's important, you know, to be able to share that But, you know, I think as overwhelming as this next year is going to be, and again, as I said, you all are the ones doing the hard work, but I think it's important that as much as possible that we, you know, we're going to be treading water, but we also want to be able to kind of move beyond that. And I think it's important to have these goals to be working on, and as much as we can. Just to kind of link it back to the school start times, you know, for that reason, you know, I didn't weigh in earlier, but I think in a similar fashion, I think we don't want to leave that one behind. I think that's, you know, we identified that as a key goal for us this year, which unfortunately we couldn't realize. And I think it's important, similarly, that we keep that in the forefront and you know, figure out how we're going to continue to work towards that.
Penny?
So I also support the addition of this goal for the Board of Ed, and I guess specifically in item 2A, I think I would like to add on to the end of that and develop an action plan, because as the collaborative process goes forward, I think we're going to start to figure out like what we don't know and identify it, and then maybe steps that we want to take to address it. So I would say, you know, that we should have this district-wide statement on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and develop, you know, an action plan for the district, an appropriate one. And then I would also, because I think we don't know what we don't know yet, I would also encourage that we use, to the extent that we can in the budget this year, a good expert, as we did with Ruler. I thought we did in that we used some very, you know, the professional from Yale who was terrific. If there's someone else that we can find and we can use judiciously, I think that could really help us and get us to move forward in this in a good way, and maybe to avoid pitfalls.
Okay. I guess the only piece of feedback, Penny, on that is so our goals sort of outline an action plan for us for this year, right? So when you're talking about action plan, I think that, I guess we'd want to think about this as that may be something that occurs as we get into the spring, after we've had presentations and we do a little more of understanding current practices, right? So we'd want to. Yeah,
no, I would think the action plan would be something that we develop not for this year, but for future years, you know, sort of like the way we've, I mean, I'm sorry if I wasn't articulate about that, but, you know, when we've had important curricular initiatives before, we've said, all right, we're going to start, you know, develop a plan and then focus on a couple of grades to start with. And I saw this as more identifying kind of good work that we're doing here, but then maybe if as we get into the statement in the spring, we could figure out, you know, more of what we think we might need to do.
Great.
As we understand it all better.
Yep.
I mean, that's my point. Is this is a massively important curricular change, and to, you know, to do it in a year when we're completely bandwidth constrained, I think is giving it short shrift, and kind of it's, you know, it seems rather knee-jerk to me. There's, you know, passions are high right now. It's usually not the greatest time to have, you know, really thoughtful approaches to things, and to do things in a reactive way. So as a period to start to study curriculum, to start to understand what other schools have done, where there's been successes and failures, I think makes all the sense in the world. But to try to, you know, this is the first time I'm seeing this language, and it looks like it's trying to shoot for a complete overhaul of the curriculum in a year where, you know, the timing couldn't be worse in terms of the ability to have the time and space to put in the the proper thought that it deserves.
So, I mean, one idea we might be able to do is say that we want to establish a more long-term plan, and then where there are opportunities, because it sounds like the district is ready to do some, to, you know, move forward with educational issues and educational development this year at different levels. You know, we don't want to hold the teachers and staff back from doing that. So maybe it'd be more just sort of a change in emphasis on the language, not necessarily a change in what you all are going to do. But maybe setting this up as something that the board is seeing as a multi-year process with some initial steps to be taken, maybe some initial implementation this year. That's something that we have to, you know, really study and think about.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I mean, I think that's what this entire set of goals and objectives is, right? It's a, you know, this is what is going to be done this year, but it's being done on a continuum that, you know, encompasses years past and years in the future. I view 2A, the statement, as sort of a most likely, if it's done well, something that will be the long-term kind of mission statement, and then everything below it is, what are we doing year to year? And, you know, B through G will be different next year than B through G this year. I mean, I take, Carl, your point around this being, you know, not really an ideal year to really roll anything important out. It's really, you know, you could use that and say, well, geez, we really shouldn't try to do too much. But at the same time, I just think this is really important. It's something that we should do as much as we possibly can on. And I don't think, you know, although each of these, you know, subtopics is important, I think they're going to, you know, they're going to grow and become increasingly important over time. So I view this as a, you know, a step in the right direction, but the first of many steps.
Yeah, I agree with the idea of you know, that A is the most important, and frankly, as you said, like, if you get it right, it's going to be, you know, wonderful. And that's the point, is to get it right. And you can spend an entire year getting a mission statement right. And then there's all these other things. And if you look at G, identify and share system-wide efforts regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion. I mean, that's a hugely wide-ranging statement. I don't even know what it means.
Sherry, go ahead.
Thanks. So I just, again, I want to reiterate that this is crucial work. We need to move forward on this now. This isn't a nice to do that we can defer until next year. I think that this has been a very thoughtful first step. I mean, it starts with a goal that guides action. And I think it starts here with a goal around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and us coming up with a public statement on this. I think that it should have been done yesterday, quite frankly, in my opinion. And I think that will guide the rest of the work. And this is something that it's so crucial at this moment in history. We do not have the option to say, you know, that this is not the right time. We can do this next year. We must move forward on this work now.
Sorry, I'm very glitchy right now, so I hope I can finish what I want to say, but I would just say that I think our students, particularly at the high school level, want to have more educational opportunities. I think there's a lot going on in our country, and I think, you know, there's just a curiosity and just based on what they're being exposed to on social media and elsewhere. I think we have to play a role in that, educationally speaking. I think B through E, you know, it could be a little or it could be a lot. And I would look to you all to sort of say to us, you know, what's possible and what you would suggest in areas B to E. What the district as a whole is doing right now. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that.
Katrina, for me at least, I lost the question in what you were saying.
Right.
So the last couple sentences.
Okay. I'll try again.
You're going out again.
Is that would be you all sharing with all of us the what the district is currently doing system-wide.
I think that was some of the intentions. What I hear you asking, Sherry, Katrina, is it really about what can we share with all of you on what we've done in the past few years in regards to all of this, and then that's kind of your starting point, and then moving forward. I mean, when we look at the social studies curriculum, the last time we actually gave the Board of Education an update on social studies was 2015, when the new state standards went into effect. So we have made huge shifts in our social studies curriculum. And right now it's the current 8th graders who've actually gone through the changes of our entire social studies curriculum. They haven't even hit high school yet. And so, you know, the studying of different, you know, we didn't study Africa in 4th grade before 2015. You know, we didn't study the Middle East in 2nd grade before 2015. So there's been a lot of shifts in the social studies curriculum, which I use that as an example because those are kind of the assured experiences that all the kids are getting addressed. And so it's what can we share with you of some of the things that we've done in the district, knowing that we still have a lot to do and a lot more to learn and a lot more professional growth, but it's kind of a starting place of what can we share with you and with the community, and then just try to build upon it. Some of the best feedback we get is after we do these presentations, and then you all start asking us great questions. Did you consider this? Have you thought about this? Have we gotten feedback from this group of stakeholders? And then that's usually how our goals and our objectives will kind of merge from year to year. So it really is trying to give you an update of where we are, what we've been doing, what we've been working on, and then trying to build from there. And that's really more specifically probably, you know, B, and certainly C, the education to parents would be new. E is kind of a continuing, F would be continuing. So those are just some of the ways that we can continue some of the work too.
Okay. And then last but not least, goal 5. There's a COVID specific goal in goal 5 as well, which is, and that's our stewardship goal. So it is financial certainly, but it extends beyond that, of course, with our facilities and classes and what have you. So the new goal here is to develop and implement responsive COVID-19 plans to accommodate staff, students, families, and the community for in-school, hybrid, or distance learning instruction based on the guidelines issued by the state of Connecticut and CDC and the state and local health departments. So much of what we have to do is resource heavy and facilities heavy that, you know, in the plan, you'll see lots of focus has been placed on our classroom design and social distancing and plexiglass in places, and looking at ventilation systems and all kinds of work that's gone on in the facilities to, you know, increase the safety in alignment with these recommendations. So the rest remains the same. Brendan.
So I said this, I think, at our last board meeting, but I would just like to, you know, remind all of us and encourage you all to, you know, particularly since we underspent our, you know, this past year's budget as a result of, you know, distance learning, that if there are things that we feel like we need to deal with, you know, a community of families and students who need help, and it's clear from the survey that, you know, there are many people who need help, whether it's, you know, social and emotional, or you know, getting caught up on some things that they may have missed or may have been challenging in a distance learning environment, that if we need the resources, we go back to the town and ask for them. It's obviously an unprecedented environment, and I personally don't believe that, again, particularly since we essentially saved, I think, over $1 million, you know, even with some of the money that we set aside this past year, that we should feel like we are, you know, totally tied into the budget the significantly cut budget that we got for this upcoming school year. So I think we should keep that in mind. And if there are things we feel like we need, you know, we should go and talk to the town about them.
Thank you.
Any other comments on goals? Okay, so with that, is there a motion to approve as a first read?
Oh.
Brendan, second. Julie? Okay.
Great. So as I mentioned before, we will make them available on our website as we do with all of these. We'll have that up at some point tomorrow. That, you know, all the handouts from tonight.
Okay. Dr. Lutzi, any other announcements, future business?
Well, I think we have one more comments from the public opportunity if you like to do that, correct?
Sorry?
On the agenda, we have...
Oh, I skipped over comments, sorry. Yes, comments from the public. Sorry, didn't mean to do that.
It's late.
Yeah, if there's anyone wishing to address the board, please.
So it just dropped out on me, so I'll just repeat. If anyone wishes to address the board, please use the raise your hand feature. Okay. Okay. Then on my end, just simply that the next our next Board of Ed meeting is August 10th. The world's going to move between now and then. There's so much going on. If the board would like to schedule a workshop between now and then to talk more about the goals, I guess reach out to Katrina, let her know. We'll get a date in the calendar.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. You cut out, I'm sorry. Are we at adjournment? Motion to adjourn. Jerry, Carl, all in favor? All right, thank you. Good night.